16-year-old Megan Boswell gave birth to her daughter, Evelyn, on November 21, 2018, in a small U.S. state. After the birth, she moved back in with her father, Tommy, who covered all her expenses, including buying her a car. Despite this support, tensions within the family remained high. Megan frequently caused problems, acting out in typical teenage rebellion. As a result, Tommy relocated her to a trailer owned by a relative, but he continued to pay for everything since Megan refused to take responsibility for her own needs. By December 2019, she had moved out of the trailer to live with her new boyfriend, Hunter Wood. From that point on, they only met once for a fishing trip. During the Christmas holidays, Tommy saw Megan only occasionally and had little contact with his granddaughter, Evelyn. This situation continued until February 18, 2020, when Tommy became concerned and contacted Child Protective Services. On that day, he reported to the Department of Child Services that 1-year-old Evelyn had disappeared under unusual circumstances and that he had not heard from her for a couple of months. Whenever Tommy tried to discuss Evelyn's whereabouts with Megan, she avoided the topic. Initially, she claimed that Evelyn was with her biological father, Eaton Percy, who was in the U.S. Army. However, Tommy suspected that Megan did not have a romantic relationship with Eaton for a while, because their relationship was usually quite ordinary, similar to other relationships in her life. He is unsure if Eaton is Evelyn's father, but Megan insists that Eaton kidnapped the child. Tommy attempted to contact Eaton to inquire about Evelyn's situation, but he was unsuccessful. Tommy did not believe the story about Megan. The more Tommy discussed the matter with her, the less believable her explanations became, and she often avoided answering questions directly. Worried about the situation, Tommy decided to take action. He called the juvenile department to report that he last saw his granddaughter, Evelyn, on Thanksgiving and that she had since gone missing. This report triggered a significant response. Although Megan was aware that Evelyn was missing, she did not report it, which raised concerns about her behavior. After a brief investigation, it became clear that 1-year-old Evelyn was indeed missing. The state police and the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation became involved, launching a large-scale search operation. However, they were unable to locate Evelyn in the following days. Despite Tommy's struggles with alcohol addiction, he was a caring father and grandfather, was genuinely worried about Evelyn's well-being. Many believed that the child might be in trouble due to issues with her parents. As the investigation continued, detectives turned their attention to Megan. She maintained that she had left Evelyn in the care of a man named Eaton temporarily, but after that, Evelyn disappeared. Megan claimed that Eaton did not even let her into his home and described their short relationship as abusive and manipulative. She felt scared when he drank and became violent. During her last visit, there was a lengthy conversation between them in which they both agreed that Evelyn would stay with him, but he refused to let Megan see her daughter. After about 20 minutes, Megan was compelled to leave and return to her car, where her boyfriend, Hunter Wood, was waiting for her. This situation raised alarms for several reasons. Firstly, Megan had full custody of Evelyn, and Eaton never contested that custody or made any claims regarding the child. Secondly, although Megan had been avoiding any relationship with Eaton, she insisted on leaving Evelyn with him for several months to help foster a relationship between them, while she was trying to build her own relationship with Hunter. It was important to understand the situation clearly. Before Christmas 2019, Megan mentioned that Eaton had completely stopped communicating with her. He ignored her phone calls and messages. However, closer to the new year, he got drunk and finally contacted her again. Their conversation was harsh, with him threatening her by saying he would come and kill her if she continued calling him. Despite the threats, Megan did not contact the police or report any concerns about her child. She explained that she didn't want to ruin anyone's holiday and planned to address the situation after New Year's. All of this raised suspicions. The discussion with Megan went on for several hours. During this time, her story changed multiple times, but the main point remained the same: Evelyn had been with Eaton since December, and she still had no idea where her daughter was now. Her inconsistent narrative and cold, detached demeanor, with no visible concern for her child, raised alarms. However, there was not enough evidence for an arrest or charges, so Megan was released for the time being. The investigation is now focused on Eaton, the biological father of Evelyn, as authorities seek clarity on the troubling situation. After questioning Megan, law enforcement officers felt conflicted about her. She appeared genuinely distressed and eager to understand her daughter's disappearance, yet there were inconsistencies in her statements and actions that raised concerns. Consequently, the police remained cautious, keeping all possibilities, however grim, in mind without rushing to conclusions. Megan appeared on television, seeking assistance in locating her daughter. Although she hadn't shown much interest in Evelyn's welfare over the past 2 months, she portrayed herself as a concerned mother in front of reporters. With tears in her eyes, she implored anyone with information to come forward, expressing her love and longing for her daughter. Megan even recorded a message intended for Evelyn, hoping the child would see it on TV and return home. However, this display struck detectives as somewhat overdone. They suspected that she was trying to divert suspicion away from herself and was acting for the cameras. Concerns about her grew stronger as investigators spoke with those closest to her. They painted her as a neglectful mother who had little regard for Evelyn. Perhaps due to her young age, it seemed she was unprepared for motherhood. She lacked a close bond with her child and prioritized her personal life over parental responsibilities. Many family members questioned why Megan hadn't reported her daughter missing to the police, especially given the alarming behavior of Eaton, who was believed to have abducted Evelyn. Megan provided a new explanation for her inaction, suggesting that Eaton might have taken Evelyn and that she wanted to avoid drawing attention to the situation in the hope of resolving it quietly. She claimed that involving the police could lead to unnecessary panic and complications. However, this reasoning appeared unconvincing to investigators. While Megan was participating in multiple interviews, the county sheriff searching for Evelyn held a press conference. He quickly realized that the information Megan provided was inconsistent. It was unclear when Evelyn had last been seen. Tommy claimed that he saw his granddaughter on Thanksgiving, while Megan stated that she had given Evelyn to Eaton around December 26, 2019. The nanny, who occasionally cared for Evelyn, stated that she had seen her on December 10 or 11, but after that, Megan unexpectedly stopped using her services. Megan had her reasons for wanting to keep Evelyn with her during the holidays, as she wanted to spend time with family. However, even after the holidays, she did not contact the nanny again. This inconsistency added to the many contradictions that investigators encountered. Detectives attempted to reach Evelyn's biological father, Eaton. Megan claimed that she took her daughter to Texas in February, but Eaton was actually in Louisiana serving in the Army. When detectives managed to speak to Eaton, it became clear that he couldn't take care of Evelyn since he was stationed in another state. He received media attention and was required to give several interviews. He stated that in February 2020, he received multiple phone calls while at Fort Johnson, Louisiana. The Guardianship Service reached out to him to inquire about Evelyn's whereabouts. This caught him off guard because he had no information about her. Later, the police contacted him about an incident involving Evelyn, but he still didn't understand the situation because Megan refused to discuss it with him. The detectives invited Eaton for questioning. He was cooperative, allowing them access to his phone, agreeing to provide DNA samples, and permitting searches of his barracks and car. He confirmed that his only meeting with Evelyn was on Christmas 2019. Megan's claims were shocking to him. She aimed to establish his paternity, believing him to be Evelyn's biological father. Eaton was doubtful but agreed to the DNA test. When detectives informed him about his communications with Megan, he noted that much of the narrative was fabricated since he wasn't even sure if Evelyn was his daughter. He also said he would not take the girl away from Megan, as he was living on a military base and was unable to care for her. Eaton colleagues confirmed that he had never left the service and that Evelyn was not accompanying him. They had never lived together with Megan, and he did not harm Evelyn, despite her claims. They had a brief one-night encounter and never saw each other again. The detectives worked to determine who was lying, and after spending several hours interviewing Eaton, his colleagues, they began to suspect that Megan might be the true liar and manipulator in the situation. After extensive questioning, they ultimately cleared Eaton of suspicion as a potential kidnapper. During the search for Evelyn, several witnesses came forward with information. In particular, details about a silver BMW were linked to individuals who might know Evelyn's whereabouts. This car was located in Wills County, North Carolina, on February 21st. Two individuals, named Angela and William, were arrested for using the car. Angela, who is Megan's mother, stated that she purchased the vehicle, which now belongs to her daughter's boyfriend. However, she did not have any paperwork to verify her ownership. It was later revealed that this silver 2007 BMW was reported stolen in North Carolina. All individuals associated with the vehicle were arrested, but the charges were not related to Evelyn's disappearance. The detectives were taken aback by the information provided by Megan. During a previous interrogation, she had accused Eaton of abducting her daughter and refusing to return her. However, in a subsequent interview, she suddenly changed her story. Megan likely realized that her initial story about Eaton wasn't credible and decided to create a new narrative. She unexpectedly told reporters that an unknown person had kidnapped her daughter, Evelyn. However, just a few minutes later in the same interview, she denied making that claim. Due to these strange actions, detectives arranged to speak with Megan again. During this meeting, she quickly introduced a new version of the incident that hadn't been mentioned before. This time, her mother, Angela, who is 42 years old, was involved in the story. Megan claimed that she had taken her daughter away from Eaton and later met Angela at a cafe. During this meeting, Angela was very aggressive, insisting that she would take Evelyn because she believed Megan couldn't be a proper mother. Megan noted that her relationship with her mother had always been terrible. She described her as vindictive and manipulative, and suspected that Angela took Evelyn out of a desire for revenge. Megan described Angela's behavior toward Evelyn as extremely cruel. In the cafe parking lot, Angela reportedly abandoned Evelyn, which may have caused a head injury. Megan felt powerless to intervene while Angela left with her daughter. She was too afraid to report the incident to the police, hoping it would resolve on its own. During that time, Angela was residing in a trailer park in Virginia. Although law enforcement found Megan's account hard to believe, they could not dismiss it completely. They conducted a search of 3 trailers but found no evidence that Angela had been with a child. The inconsistencies in Megan's statements led the police to doubt her credibility, and they requested that she take a polygraph test, which she declined. Megan claimed she was pregnant and believed the test could harm her unborn child or yield inaccurate results. Meanwhile, Hunter Wood, Megan's boyfriend, wanted to speak with a local news outlet for his own safety. To his surprise, he faced pressure not only from the police but also from the local community. The situation escalated to the point where he couldn't speak to journalists himself. Instead, his father had to intervene. Some townspeople suspected that Hunter might be connected to Evelyn's disappearance, and Megan frequently mentioned him in her already dubious stories. Through his father, Hunter shared that he only had a brief acquaintance with Megan. He characterized their relationship as short, consisting of some flirting and occasional meetings. They first met when Megan applied for a job at a local restaurant owned by Hunter. It was during this time that he met Evelyn for the only time. Later, when Megan's mother came to work, she would always mention that Evelyn was with her biological father, Eaton. She insisted that Eaton take Evelyn, but Hunter never met Eaton and only learned about him through Megan. Since rumors and threats against Hunter on social media, stemming from Megan's lies, began, he felt compelled to shut down both his personal page and the restaurant's social media accounts. Many people began to boycott his restaurant, causing significant harm to his business due to the actions of a disgruntled employee. Hunter desperately wanted to find Evelyn to clear his name and dispel any suspicions, but the situation remained unresolved. As the online harassment continued, Hunter's mental health began to suffer. He moved in with his mother for support during this difficult time, but even that was not enough. Eventually, he was hospitalized for treatment and evaluation, but his condition only worsened there. His father was deeply worried about the toll Megan's lies were taking on him. His father noted that, although there were days when he seemed better, his father often could not even recognize him during visits. Due to these challenges, Hunter was unable to participate in the hearings regarding Evelyn's case that took place later. The police never formally accused him of any crime related to her disappearance. The negativity directed at him stemmed solely from Megan's fabricated claims. A shocking development in the case revealed that a paternity test showed Eaton was not Evelyn's biological father, and the identity of Evelyn's actual father remained a mystery. Megan had been lying from the start of the search for her daughter. Her false information led law enforcement to waste a significant amount of time and resources on an ultimately misguided investigation. As a result of growing suspicions, Megan was arrested on February 25, 2020. At that time, her daughter's whereabouts were still unknown, and detectives had not yet been able to charge her with anything specific regarding the case. Megan faced charges of making false accusations and was held in jail with bail set at $25,000, which her father, Tommy, refused to pay. While in custody, Megan claimed she was pregnant, but later investigations revealed that this claim was also false. With this, Megan became the primary suspect in her daughter's disappearance. Fortunately, she was unable to leave, allowing investigators to intensify their efforts and focus on questioning her. Eventually, these efforts bore fruit, and she finally confessed. Megan stated that at that time, she and Hunter slept in the same bed as Evelyn, and the next morning, they found the baby unresponsive. Fearing accusations, Megan decided to dispose of her daughter. She placed the baby's body in the trash but did not inform the police of its location. It was now clear that Evelyn was deceased, but authorities needed to locate the body to confirm her death. On February 27, a search warrant was issued for the trailer where Megan and Evelyn lived. Forensic experts investigated the area and the trailer, using luminol and ground-penetrating radar to search for hidden spaces in the ground. There were also concerns that the child may have been drowned in a nearby lake. Searches at all these locations, which involved specially trained dogs and a dive team, came up empty. Investigators also examined the property of Tommy, Megan's father, located 5 kilometers from the trailer, but initially found nothing there as well. On March 6, 2020, investigators discovered a horrifying scene in a playhouse on Tommy's property. They found a trash can that had been placed in the wrong location. When the police opened it, they discovered a small child's leg protruding from the can. The girl had been discarded like trash. Her body was positioned vertically. She was tightly wrapped in a fleece blanket and then placed inside a garbage bag with aluminum foil wrapped around her face. She had been thrown away with the household waste. Before her death, the girl had been placed head down in the can and trapped by other items, unable to escape. She suffered a painful death. Contrary to what her mother, Megan, had claimed, her death was not accidental. The cold weather helped preserve the child's remains, and a forensic expert determined that she died from suffocation. Evidence suggested that she had faced physical abuse before her murder. Several bruises in various stages of healing indicated that she had been repeatedly beaten, which could explain the head injury that Megan mentioned. This head injury was allegedly inflicted by Angela, possibly as a precaution to conceal the abuse in case the body was discovered. What began as a search for a missing child turned into a murder investigation. As a result, Megan faced over 10 charges but pleaded not guilty to any of them. During the court hearings for Evelyn's murder, the prosecutor portrayed Megan as a manipulative liar who misled investigators and fabricated inconsistent stories to hide her involvement in the crime. The defense lawyer argued that the incident was an accident, claiming Megan panicked when she realized her child had died in her sleep. While the defense correctly noted that conflicting statements do not prove murder, the courtroom atmosphere was chaotic. The prosecution presented over 30 witnesses familiar with Megan's family, who described her as an irresponsible mother living in a trailer park with her daughter. She neglected to pay bills, taking advantage of her relatives' property while her father resolved all financial issues. Hunter, a witness, expressed concerns about Megan's parenting during a conversation with his father. He remarked that Evelyn appeared unkempt, smelled bad, and was poorly dressed, indicating she hadn't been bathed in a long time. Several other witnesses echoed this sentiment, noting Megan's indifference, which persisted even after her daughter disappeared. She did not participate in the search and showed no genuine concern when questioned about Evelyn. One of the prosecution's key pieces of evidence was Megan's fingerprints on the foil and film used to wrap Evelyn's body. Her fingerprints were also found on the trash can and in the playhouse where Evelyn's body was discovered. Despite this, the defense attorney contended that the prosecution lacked direct evidence. The lawyer argued that the evidence was circumstantial, suggesting that Megan's fingerprints were from previous visits to her father's home. However, Megan admitted to disposing of her daughter's body in that manner. Megan spun a web of lies that hindered the search for Evelyn. It was suggested that Megan viewed Evelyn as an obstacle to her relationship with her new, successful boyfriend, Hunter Wood. The defense attorney argued that Evelyn's death was an accident and attributed Megan's actions to her fear and inexperience as a young mother. However, the prosecution presented stronger evidence regarding the circumstances surrounding Evelyn's death. After deliberating for 2 days, the jury found Megan guilty on all charges, including first-degree murder, resulting in 3 murder convictions. The court then held one final discussion to determine her punishment. Megan's mother, Angela, attended the hearing and spoke to the jury in hopes of receiving a lighter sentence. Although she understood that Megan would likely face a life sentence, she was hopeful that Megan could still qualify for parole. Angela described the struggles that she and her husband, Tommy, faced, illustrating the difficult environment in which their daughter, Megan, was raised. Angela claimed that Megan frequently witnessed her parents using alcohol and even banned substances, creating an unhealthy and, at times, dangerous home atmosphere. Tommy had once been convicted of assault. Megan's issues at home began when she was around 7 years old, leading her to live with her grandparents for a significant period. By 2019, Angela was imprisoned, and Megan was placed in a foster home while still attending high school. After moving to the city, Angela was unable to send Megan to school due to a lack of time. This made Angela believe that Megan's difficult behavior stemmed from never having experienced the care of a loving mother. Later, Megan's adoptive mother testified, revealing that when Megan joined their family, she was in poor condition, tired, wearing dirty clothes, and having unmanageable hair. Megan also exhibited signs of emotional distress. She appeared fearful and had visible bruises. At that time, she was pregnant. Megan took several weeks to recover. Despite her hardships, she aimed to be a good mother. Having cared for her younger siblings, she applied that knowledge to caring for her baby, Evelyn. She ensured that she attended all of Evelyn's doctor appointments. However, the nanny who worked with them expressed concerns during the trial, noting that Evelyn had a severe diaper rash that she had never seen before. This situation arose shortly before Evelyn went missing. The home environment was often chaotic and unsanitary, and, according to the nanny, Megan neglected Evelyn's hygiene when she was alone. After Angela testified, the jury recommended a life sentence for Megan with the possibility of parole. The prosecutor argued for a life sentence without the chance for parole. Ultimately, Megan was sentenced to life in prison but could be eligible for parole after 51 years. This outcome sparked mixed reactions among those who cared about Evelyn. Some felt it was a just decision, while many believed that the harm caused by Megan's actions would leave lasting scars on others for a lifetime. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case, the case of Sarah Cafferkey. Sarah Cafferkey was born on June 20, 1990, in Queensland, Australia. When she was young, her family encountered many financial difficulties, which caused tension between her parents. Eventually, her father found a better-paying job, and the family relocated to Bacchus Marsh, a suburb of Melbourne. However, moving house made the problems in her family increasingly serious. As a result, Sarah's parents are unable to mend their relationship, their disagreements leading them to realize that they cannot continue to be together. They decided to separate, and Sarah stayed with her mother. Despite their disagreements, both parents maintained a peaceful relationship to avoid affecting Sarah's life. The divorce proceedings concerning custody and property were handled amicably, as they both wanted to prioritize their daughter's well-being. At the time, Sarah and her mother lived in Bacchus Marsh, a town known for its green hills, farmhouses, and agricultural lands. where crime was rare. Even though she was an only child, Sarah never felt lonely, because they lived in a close-knit neighborhood. In her early years, it was easy for her to make friends thanks to her outgoing personality. When she wasn't with her mother, she spent time with her father in Queensland. However, as she grew older, she wanted to stay with her mother more to be closer to her friends. Due to her father's busy work schedule and his frequent visits to Bacchus Marsh to visit her, she had difficulty making friends in Queensland. Eventually, when Sarah was able to stay in Bacchus Marsh, she began visiting Queensland less often, much to her father's disappointment. Despite this, they maintained regular communication through phone calls, and her father occasionally came to visit. Both parents loved her and supported her throughout her life. When Sarah started elementary school, her mother chose the closest school, which was just a 10-minute walk from their home. There, she quickly made many friends. The route to school passed through a local swamp, a large flooded area with paths. This was the only short way for her to walk there. Along the way, she noticed an old house off to the side, unaware of how significant it would become in her life. Since first grade, Sarah has been very studious. She excelled in her studies and spent a lot of time on her homework after school. At the same time, she started participating in athletics and took part in competitions with other kids. She also started practicing karate and singing in the choir. She often expressed to her family that she wanted a brother or sister, but her mother wasn't ready for another child and declined. As a result, Sarah remained an only child. After finishing 10th grade, Sarah faced health challenges. She was diagnosed with asthma and was hospitalized, where doctors discovered that she had bronchial spasms that could escalate into serious attacks. This condition was dangerous because it could onset suddenly and lead to loss of consciousness. As a result, she had to limit her physical activities, withdraw from competitions, stop singing, and make frequent hospital visits. The main issue was the need to quickly recognize and manage potentially life-threatening attacks. This situation disrupted her plans, so much that she had to complete her final year of school through homeschooling. Due to ongoing hospital visits, she missed a substantial amount of the curriculum and struggled to catch up on missed topics. Thankfully, Sarah was diligent and determined not to give up. However, homeschooling posed significant challenges for her, leading to a loss of contact with many friends and limiting her social interactions. Despite this, she maintained regular communication and met with a few close friends. After finishing school, she had some free time and decided to get a job at a local bar. In 2011, she turned 21 and met a guy named Christopher Stewart. He seemed nice and caring, making Sarah feel happy. She believed he was the one she could spend her life with, and often shared this with her family and friends. However, her family was concerned about him from the start. They felt he was not as good as he appeared, but Sarah, infatuated with young love, ignored their warnings. Unfortunately, their concerns soon proved valid. After 2 months of dating, Christopher began to reveal a different side of himself. He had a bad reputation in the city, with rumors of using prohibited substances and possibly being involved in criminal activities. He started to manipulate Sarah, isolating her from her friends. Sadly, Sarah didn't realize it. He then began to create rifts between her and her family. Sarah once shared with her friend Ashley how she started using soft prohibited substances. Despite being persuaded not to, she found the experience captivating. Over time, she began to support her boyfriend more, which led her to drink more frequently and experiment with more powerful banned substances. By this time, he had completely replaced her friends with his group of friends, who were all living unhealthy lifestyles and were mostly substance addicts. Their home became a gathering place for various troubled individuals who would use prohibited substances for days on end. Sarah was in a difficult situation. Her friends realize that she is losing herself and try to help. However, she refused to leave Christopher. Despite this, she was starting to feel the negative effects of her substance use. She lost her job and realized she wanted to escape this harmful cycle. At one point, she attempted to detox at home, but it was unsuccessful. Eventually, she decided to check into a medical center for an addiction treatment program. After spending a week there, Sarah successfully completed the detox process and returned home. She underwent a remarkable transformation. The treatment had a positive impact on her. She even resumed her previous interests and aspirations. Now she was determined to finish her education, pursue a career as a lawyer, find a job, and travel. To successfully quit her addiction, Sarah needed to end her relationship with her addicted boyfriend, Christopher, who was a negative influence on her life. This wasn't the first time they had broken up, and he seemed indifferent to her decision, likely believing that they would get back together eventually. However, Sarah was committed to improving her life and was determined not to revert to her old ways. Eventually, Christopher understood that he couldn't win her back, which made him angry, and he began to stalk her. One day, while working at the bar, Christopher sent a 47-year-old man named Stephen James Hunter to meet Sarah. This was unusual because Stephen was not related to either of them. He had a bad reputation in the city, as a cruel person linked to the criminal world, but these were just rumors, and no one had concrete evidence against him. Even though he scared her, she decided not to back down. During their conversation, Sarah got to know Stephen better. Gradually, they even started hanging out together. She described him as almost like a father figure to her, though it's unclear why such a close bond formed between them, despite their differences. At that time, Sarah's biological father lived in Queensland, and they kept in touch, which made Stephen's role in her life somewhat ambiguous. On November 7, 2012, Sarah, her friends, and Stephen were drinking together in the dormitory of a local educational institution where one of her friends was enrolled. The following day, Sarah and Stephen frequently exchanged text messages. On Friday, November 9, Sarah returned to her mother's house. She usually spent weekends with her family, but this time she had her own plans and went to visit a friend, promising to return by the end of the weekend. Sarah first stopped at a store, where she was captured on security cameras. Afterwards, she went to meet her mother on Saturday, but did not return home. By Sunday, there was still no news, and by Monday, she had not come back. Her mother became worried and reached out to several of Sarah's friends, who also had no idea where she was. The situation grew more concerning when it became clear that Sarah's car was missing along with her, indicating she had not returned home. There had been no problems in her family relationships, making it unlikely that she had run away, especially since she hadn't taken any belongings with her. The prolonged silence became increasingly suspicious. By Tuesday, November 13, there was still no word from her, so her mother contacted multiple news channels to report Sarah as a missing person. On that Tuesday, Sarah was supposed to attend her rehabilitation program, but she never showed up at the medical center. Sarah's parents began to worry about her disappearance and suspected that her ex-boyfriend, Christopher, might be involved. They questioned whether he could have kidnapped her or manipulated her in some way. Concerned for their daughter's safety, her mother contacted the police. The police quickly began their search. The first 48 hours were crucial, but they were missed, raising the possibility that Sarah might not be alive. Initially, the main suspect was her ex-boyfriend, Christopher Stewart, but he was soon cleared after investigators confirmed his alibi. The police then turned their attention to Stephen, a 47-year-old man who had a negative reputation in the community. Residents described him as having issues with self-control, anger, and legal troubles. A review of his criminal record has raised further concerns. He is known to be addicted to prohibited substances and is suspected of trafficking in prohibited substances. Several of Sarah's friends identified a man named Stephen as the last person who might have seen her alive. They believed that Sarah was visiting him. The police reached out to Stephen, who confirmed that he had seen Sarah on Saturday, November 10, when she arrived at his house near the swamp. They said goodbye that evening, as Sarah stayed behind while Stephen had to leave for a business matter, intending to return in a few hours. He stated that Sarah was supposed to wait at his house, which was near the swamp that she used to walk by on her way to school as a child. This area was a large marshy region surrounding her mother's house, and Stephen owned a small house there. On Sunday, when he returned, he found she was gone, and like everyone else, he was unable to contact her. Investigators arrived at the swamp and conducted a thorough inspection of the surrounding area, but found nothing suspicious. On November 15, the investigation progressed when police received a tip about Sarah's car. The vehicle was located parked in a small town called Morey Barren, about a half-hour drive from Bacchus Marsh. There was no connection between Morey Barren and Stephen, yet he remained a suspect. On November 17, police were granted a search warrant for Stephen's home, which was located near a swamp. When they opened the door, they were met with a pungent smell of decomposition. Inside the house, everything was in disarray, as if a struggle had occurred. Bloodstains were found in the garbage bins, various rooms, and on the stairs. Although they did not find a body, forensic scientists recovered several items from the dumpster, including a container of acid. The most notable item discovered by the police was a large green garbage can filled with concrete that had hardened quickly. Investigators immediately suspected that a body was inside. The trash was then sent to a lab for analysis, and the results confirmed their suspicions: a human body encased in concrete at the bottom of the bin. The body was compressed and deformed, indicating that it had been subjected to extreme pressure. It seemed that Stephen did not have time to dispose of the body and did not take into account that hiding the body in such a way would not mask the smell of death, which had filled the entire house. On November 20, 2012, Stephen was arrested for the murder of Sarah. During the initial interrogation, Stephen denied any involvement in the murder and also denied trying to hide the body. However, after being questioned harshly by detectives, he eventually broke down and provided his account of events, admitting to killing her. He explained that at around 7 p.m. on Saturday, November 10th, Sarah came to his house where they drank alcohol and used prohibited substances together. They then got into an argument, and in a fit of anger, she pushed Stephen and hit him in the chest. As a result, he lost control and attacked her, hitting her repeatedly in the head until she lost consciousness and fell to the floor. Stephen attacked Sarah with a hammer, causing fatal wounds to her skull and damaging her lungs and liver. Tragically, Sarah died from these injuries. Feeling lost and confused about what to do with Sarah's body, Stephen then turned to a friend. Because he was under supervision, he was determined to conceal his crime. Not wanting to face prison again, Stephen locked his house and returned with his friend. When he explained what had happened, his friend quickly distanced himself, insisting he wanted no part in the murder. Meanwhile, Sarah's body remained in a pool of blood on the kitchen floor. 2 days later, he wrapped Sarah's body in a bag, placed it in his car, and went to visit a friend named Timmy, where he confessed to the murder. At the party, Stephen asked his friend Timmy for help disposing of a body, specifically wanting to bury it. Timmy refused, expressing concern about getting into legal trouble, and suggested that Stephen turn himself in. Despite this, Timmy did not avoid the conversation. They even went to a coffee shop to grab a bite to eat, with the body still in Timmy's car. On their way back, Stephen bought a canister of hydrochloric acid, 3 bags of quick-drying cement, and a roll of black polyethylene film. After their meeting, they parted ways, and Stephen proceeded to carry out his plan, which involved encasing Sarah's body in concrete at his house in the swamp. He placed the body in the bottom of a plastic trash can and filled it with concrete. On November 14, Stephen returned to take Sarah's car and then drove to a nearby town, Morey Barron. He left the car there in hopes of confusing the investigation. During the investigation, it became clear that his negative reputation in the city was much worse than previously thought. Stephen had a long criminal history, and his life had been troubled from the start. He grew up in harsh conditions, under the abuse of his father, who bullied him and used a weapon to instill fear. His father once tied up his mother, threatening to shoot her, but he managed to call his grandparents for help. They were able to persuade his father to put the weapon down and free his mother. These traumatic experiences had a profound impact on Stephen, but they did not excuse his later actions. Even as a child, Stephen was already known to the police in his city. In 1983, when he was just 17 years old, he committed his first armed robbery. The police apprehended him and charged him, but due to his age, he avoided serious consequences. This was his first major crime. By 1986, at the age of 20, he was again in trouble with the law. He worked at a supermarket in a Melbourne suburb with an 18-year-old girl named Jacqueline, whom he had feelings for. However, she was not interested in him. Tragically, Stephen attacked Jacqueline, resulting in her death simply because she rejected his advances. He then disposed of her body, but never confessed to the crime in court. Despite his denial, the jury found him guilty, and he was sentenced to 16 years in prison. He served 13 years and was released in December. He was then 35, had spent most of his adult life in prison, and is now back in Australia. Jacqueline's family opposed the situation, convinced that Stephen was beyond rehabilitation and would continue committing crimes. Unfortunately, they could not prevent his release or impose any restrictions on him. In 2005, their worst fears came to fruition when Stephen returned to court for theft, assault, and trafficking in prohibited substances. He was sentenced to 6 years in prison but was eligible for parole after 4 years. After his release, Stephen moved to Bacchus Marsh, likely because few people there knew him. Some distant acquaintances helped him find a job in road service. However, he quickly resumed distributing illegal substances, with assistance from Sarah's ex-boyfriend, Christopher. While residents recognized him as a dangerous individual, they had no idea how dangerous he truly was. After serving another prison sentence, he was released on probation, which was scheduled to end on October 30, 2012. Just over a week after his release, Stephen murdered Sarah, making the public extremely angry. People began to feel unsafe, questioning a justice system that allowed dangerous criminals to roam free without serving their full sentences. On August 21, 2013, Stephen James Hunter was sentenced to life in prison. Normally, under Australian law, murderers can apply for parole, but Stephen was denied because of his prior criminal history involving murder. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Emma Faulds. Emma Faulds dedicated her life to serving society. She worked with troubled youth at a local education center and was known for her compassionate heart. On her 30th birthday, she adopted a weak puppy from a rescue, naming him Maverick. With her help, the dog grew stronger and became her loyal companion until her death. Emma was one of 2 daughters. Her younger sister, Miriam, was 7 years her junior. While Emma was recognized for her compassion and love of animals, her family's long-established shop also contributed to her reputation. The shop, which had been in her family since the late 19th century, had been maintained for several generations. Emma's father was the great-grandson of the original founder, who cherished the family traditions and hoped to pass the shop down to future generations. Emma was always cheerful, and often shared humorous stories about herself that showcased her vibrant personality. Her taste for bright clothing and love of jewelry, accessories set her apart from her friends. In the many photographs of her that remain, she is almost always smiling. Besides, Emma is a friendly and optimistic person who enjoys holidays. She had a lively group of friends whom she had kept close since school. Unfortunately, she had to move away to pursue her studies, which made seeing her friends infrequent. During this time, Emma focused on her education to build a future career. Her younger sister Miriam admires her positive attitude and sees her as a role model. Inspired by Emma, Miriam also pursued an education and eventually became a nurse at a local medical center. After gaining experience, Miriam moved to Abu Dhabi, UAE, to continue her career in the healthcare field. Meanwhile, Emma dedicated herself entirely to her career, finding great joy in her work. However, this dedication came with challenges. Despite her friendly disposition, she struggled to form lasting relationships with men. She had a few boyfriends, but the relationships often ended for various reasons. This may have been because Emma prioritized establishing her career and becoming self-sufficient before considering starting a family. On Sunday, April 28, 2019, Emma decided to visit her friend, Ross Willix, who lived in Feed Park. Emma had maintained a close friendship with him for about 20 years, which was well known among their friends. They shared similar goals and views on life. They first met in the early 20s while working at a correctional facility, with Ross serving as a prison guard and instructor for staff handling unruly prisoners, and Emma working with troubled teenagers. They quickly connected, and although Ross moved away for a while, their friendship was rekindled when he returned. They often gathered with friends to enjoy each other's company. Meeting friends was a normal activity, so it didn't raise any concerns. However, Emma suddenly stopped reaching out, which was unusual for her. She typically stayed glued to her phone, but initially no one worried because they thought she might just be having a good time and had forgotten to check in. On Tuesday, April 30, 2019, Emma was scheduled to work, but she didn't show up, which was highly unusual for her. She also did not inform her colleagues of her absence. Attempts to contact her were unsuccessful. Concerned about her, her colleagues decided to reach out to her parents, who were equally bewildered and had no idea what might have happened to their daughter. Realizing that something was wrong, her relatives contacted the police for assistance. When the police officers arrived at Emma's home, they were unable to make contact with her. They heard a dog barking inside and grew increasingly worried that something might have happened. Eventually, the officers had to break down the door. Inside, they found Emma's dog, Maverick. This discovery fueled the family's concerns, as they believed Emma would never leave her dog alone without arranging for someone to care for him, especially since he had recently undergone surgery and required constant attention. Emma was known for her caring nature, so it was clear to everyone that something must have happened to her. When Miriam learned about the situation, she realized something was wrong and quickly booked a flight back to Scotland. Upon arriving at her parents' house, she joined her family in the search for her older sister, Emma. Meanwhile, the police began gathering information from neighbors and relatives to piece together the timeline of events. A search and rescue operation, called Sultan, was initiated, involving all available police units and emergency services. They also reached out to friends, family, and bystanders for assistance, encouraging everyone to share any information on television. Emma's family arrived in the city and quickly started distributing leaflets featuring a photo of her. They leveraged social media to share her pictures and details, seeking information from local residents. They reviewed CCTV footage from the morning of April 28, when Emma was out walking her dog before her business appointment. The footage captured her talking to several neighbors, who were later interviewed as witnesses to help piece together a timeline. Emma went shopping at 5:39 p.m. that day. A dashcam from a passing car recorded Emma driving her distinctive blue BMW, recognizable by its unique license plate. The car was parked near the home of Ross, a friend she intended to visit, making him the last person known to have seen her before she went missing. On that day, Miriam spoke with Emma. Miriam mentioned that Emma had been planning to reconcile with Ross after a recent conflict. Emma intended to have a drink with him, have a conversation, and possibly spend the night if things went well. Later, around 8 p.m., one of Emma's colleagues messaged her on WhatsApp. Emma confirmed that she was at Ross's house and told her colleagues that she would be staying the night. The relationship between Emma and Ross is unclear, but her close friends and family have maintained that they are just friends. Interestingly, they had problems recently, argued several times, but then made up. Some believed that they had known each other for a long time and that their friendship could be rekindled. There was speculation that they had feelings for each other since Emma planned to stay overnight, leading to conflicting opinions. The last confirmed sighting of Emma was at 9:10 p.m. on Sunday, April 28, 2019. Her car was found parked in front of her house, but on the opposite side of the street, which raised concerns. Those who knew Emma were aware that she had a bit of obsessive-compulsive disorder, which led to some strange behavior. However, a friend of Emma's said she would never leave her car like that, and she suspected that the BMW might have been left by someone else. The police reviewed surveillance footage from city cameras and reached out to the public, hoping that someone might have seen the driver of the car that evening. They conducted searches in various apartments, looking for witnesses and checking any available video recordings. They confirmed that Emma's last known movements were on Sunday, April 28, after which she was not seen again. The last person she was with was Ross, a fact supported by CCTV footage and multiple witnesses from her circle of friends. The relationship between Ross and Emma seemed quite strange because Ross had a much darker past. He did not often talk about his identity and tried to keep his personal information private, which made him somewhat of a mystery. However, some facts about Ross were known, such as his job as a prison guard, which ended abruptly after just 4 years for 2 reasons, one official and one unofficial. According to unofficial sources, Ross was fired for organizing the smuggling of banned substances to prisoners for profit. An anonymous informant claimed he had ties to a criminal group in Glasgow that supplied him with these banned substances. In 2004, Ross's car was impounded during a search for illegal substances. No evidence was found, so law enforcement could not directly link Ross to banned substance trafficking. It seemed that Ross had been warned in advance, allowing him to cover his tracks effectively. However, there were clear violations, and authorities were determined to hold him accountable. Law enforcement officials sought a way to punish Ross to ensure he could be fired from his position and barred from returning. Consequently, he was arrested and interrogated for over 6 hours. After speaking with detectives, Ross admitted to possessing banned substances. Although a trial took place, it appears he did not face any formal penalties. Instead, he was suspended, essentially ending his career as a prison guard. He felt the need to start over and pursue his education. Ross enrolled at the University of Glasgow to study engineering, where he excelled and demonstrated great potential. After graduating, he received multiple job offers and quickly began working in his field. Over the next few years, he held positions in various companies and factories around the globe, traveling to places like Great Britain, France, Belgium, and even the Middle East. In 2010, while living and working in Israel, he met the woman who would become his wife. At that time, he was 31 and she was 45. Despite their age difference, their relationship seemed strong. However, both wanted different things. He aimed to advance his career, while she desired to start a family. This created difficulties in their relationship. He then moved to Mentone, where he took a job as a safety inspector at the station. However, at Mentone, Ross faced significant challenges that could jeopardize his career once again. From 2016 to 2018, he worked at a wind power station near Galloway Forest, in Dumfries and Galloway. On March 15, 2017, a Portuguese colleague named Antonia was performing maintenance on one of the wind turbines when he fell and died. The cause of the incident was either a failure to follow safety protocols or a malfunction of the equipment. The investigation into the incident was lengthy and revealed that Ross was simply on duty when the accident occurred. However, while the incident was still not fully investigated, another incident occurred involving Ross: the disappearance of Emma. When Emma disappeared, investigators quickly focused on Ross due to his past questionable actions. A concerning detail was that he did not participate in any search for her, despite having a close, almost sibling-like relationship with her. During his initial police interview, Ross appeared reluctant and often gave vague or hesitant answers, as if searching for the right answer. He admitted to seeing Emma that evening. They had a few drinks and smoked together before planning a party at his apartment. Finally, Emma became worried after her dog Maverick's surgery, so they prepared to go to her house. He stated that he left Emma's house in the early morning of April 29, but he had no idea what happened during the time that followed. As soon as Emma's home was thoroughly searched, there was no sign of anything amiss. There were no signs of struggle, such as clutter in the house or bloodstains. This led police to suspect that Ross and Emma may not have been at her house, raising concerns that he may be lying to cover up the crime. Detectives planned to gather information from Ross, and on May 7, he was arrested, just a week after Emma was officially reported missing. The following day, he faced charges of murder and obstructing the investigation, although Emma had still not been found. Ross requested a lawyer, and his defense attorney argued that the authorities lacked sufficient evidence for the arrest, suggesting they could not hold him without just cause. By this time, enough circumstantial evidence had been gathered. In some respects, Ross's lawyer was correct. The investigation relied on circumstantial evidence, and no body had been found. As a result, the possibility of making an arrest was uncertain. It was crucial to find direct evidence of murder. The decision was made to continue searching in the most logical locations that Ross frequently visited. The first place on the list was the wind power plant where he was employed at the time. Investigators tracked his cell phone movements on the day Emma went missing and then reconstructed much of the day's timeline using video from security cameras and his phone. Late in the evening, Ross's smartphone was found on the power plant's premises. Detectives reviewed the CCTV footage from the area and discovered that the cameras recorded at least 2 visits by him in the days following Emma's disappearance. The first visit occurred on April 29 in his Mercedes SUV. The next day, he returned in his wife's Jaguar. This repetition did not appear to be coincidental. It likely indicated that he was attempting to conceal his actions. However, with few cell towers in the area, his exact location was not known. Investigators had only been able to identify a few large, hard-to-reach areas where the body was believed to be. It was suspected that Ross and Emma had an altercation that night, resulting in harm to her, and that he subsequently took her away from the city to dispose of her. It was important to find out what happened to Emma, but after a long search, the chances of finding her alive were slim. After reviewing the information, the police pinpointed several areas that were likely locations where Emma might be buried. This helped to narrow down the search area somewhat, although it remained quite large. The police reached out to local residents who might have seen or recorded something relevant. Their investigation led them to a town called Burrell, where there were 2 roads leading to the power plant. Ross could have used these routes, but there was one problem. He came here regularly for work, so he wouldn't have aroused suspicion. Investigators gathered crucial information on the morning of April 29, the day after Emma went missing. They spotted a vehicle described as a Mercedes. In addition to appealing for help from the public, law enforcement also deployed a specialized helicopter to assist in the search. Multiple search teams worked simultaneously, thoroughly examining the suspected areas. However, they did not find any clues, which was not surprising, as much of the area investigated was heavily forested. Investigators eventually obtained surveillance footage of the car parked at Ross's home. He exited the vehicle and meticulously wiped the door handles and windows. He then spent a considerable amount of time searching inside the car, apparently trying to eliminate any evidence of his presence. In addition, his image was captured on several additional security cameras. It was discovered that he later visited a hardware store on the morning of April 30th, where he purchased 4 large bottles of bleach, chlorine, rubber gloves, various cleaning supplies, a shower curtain, and waterproof clothing. Throughout the day, Ross communicated with Emma multiple times through a messaging app and left voice messages. It was obvious he was trying to create the illusion that she was still alive to distract the investigation. However, phone records indicated that Emma had already died by that time. Investigating Ross's internet activity revealed that he conducted suspicious searches about how police track vehicles. He also looked up troubling questions related to cleaning up blood and covering up evidence after a crime. It seemed he was trying to avoid responsibility, yet he neglected to clear his browser history, apparently unaware that his online activity could be traced. Ross could not secure his release before the trial, but locating the body was essential. The only thing Ross did well was hide Emma's body, which has yet to be found. To unravel this case, experts needed to employ a microscope and spectral analysis. The police also had a pair of shoes worn by Ross on the day Emma vanished. An examination of the shoe soles revealed traces of blood and soil particles that could direct the police to the body. Advanced testing methods were utilized. Once forensic scientists provided new insights, the search area was narrowed to a specific marshy region, prompting the immediate deployment of a search party. Within 24 hours, using a specially trained dog, Emma's body was located in this designated area. Soil samples from Ross's boots matched the location of the body, with 92% accuracy. Emma was found in a remote swampy area filled with soil and moss, far from populated regions where no one would think to search for her. The location was hard to access from the air and was not easily visible. Her body was discovered naked, hidden in the bushes and covered with clumps of moss and surrounding vegetation, indicating that Ross tried to conceal her. On June 12, 2019, authorities officially announced the discovery of Emma Fauld's body, which was reported a month and a half after her disappearance. Sadly, Emma's body was in a severely decomposed state, making it impossible for forensic experts to determine the cause of death, and she could only be identified through dental records. Until the very end, her family clung to the hope that she was alive and being held by kidnappers. However, just a week after her remains were found, they publicly confirmed their search for their daughter and began posting memorial messages on dedicated social media pages. Just 3 months after Emma passed away, her beloved dog Maverick also died. Many believed Maverick didn't survive because he was heartbroken over Emma's death. This belief seemed understandable since he died earlier than expected for his breed. People were determined to find out the truth behind Emma's death, and they wanted justice. Unfortunately, the court system was slow, so the murder trial hearings did not begin until 2021. During the past 2 years, Ross consistently maintained his innocence and denied both charges against him. Unfortunately, despite his lawyer's efforts, he was found guilty on May 25. Ross Willix received a life sentence, but was eligible for parole after 20 years. Even after the verdict, Ross continued to claim he was innocent. Authorities noted that he was the only person who truly knew what happened in his home, making it impossible to recreate the incident accurately. Ross was understandably upset by the court's decision and promptly filed an appeal. His case went through several levels of the judicial system, eventually reaching the Supreme Criminal Court of Edinburgh, where the appeal was denied 6 months later. As a result, he had to accept his situation and is now serving his sentence alongside the prisoners he once supervised. At one point, he might have even supplied them with banned substances. Some are now speculating whether Ross may have pushed a coworker off the wind turbine. This seems suspicious, especially considering Ross's ability to kill. It is possible that Ross had an altercation with his coworker and pushed him off the turbine. However, this remains purely speculation, as there is no evidence to prove or disprove this theory. Welcome back to our channel. Today we will explore a new case. The case of Rachel Barber. The story from 1999 in Australia. Rachel Barber was born on September 12, 1983, in a small town in Melbourne, Victoria, Australia. She is the eldest of 3 daughters. Rachel's parents, Mike Barber and Elizabeth, lived in a middle-class neighborhood, and the girl grew up in a very loving and close-knit family. From a young age, Rachel had a deep love for classical music and a passion for dance. Her parents decided to enroll her in a ballet class. After a few lessons, they were convinced of her talent. To support her creativity, they set up a makeshift studio at home where Rachel could continue her lessons. As time went on, Rachel transformed into a beautiful young woman. She had a slender body and was popular among her friends, but despite this, she was quite shy and reserved. Her commitment to dance made it difficult for her to keep up with her schoolwork, and she worried that her academic struggles would hinder her progress in dance. This concern led her to ask her parents to allow her to transfer from her regular high school to a dance academy called Dance Factory, where she could fully focus on her passion for dance. Her parents supported her desire to pursue her passion. After enrolling in the dance academy, Rachel quickly made close friends and met Manny Corella, a fellow dancer with whom she felt an instant connection. Their romantic relationship blossomed, and their peers affectionately referred to them as Romeo and Juliet. Rachel's life was busy and filled with a schedule, but this was not a problem for her since she was doing what she loved. Every morning, one of her parents took her to the local tram stop. From there, Rachel traveled to meet her boyfriend and friends, and together they headed to the academy. After classes, they would regroup and take the tram back, where Rachel's father would pick her up for the ride home. Rachel's life seemed idyllic. She was young, attractive, popular, supported by a loving family and a caring boyfriend. On the evening of Sunday, February 28, 1999, while the Barber family was having dinner together, Rachel received 2 phone calls, but did not disclose who she was speaking to, downplaying their significance. This moment marked a turning point for her. On March 1, 1999, the day started off like any other for the Barber family. Rachel woke up early, got ready, and left for the academy. Her father, Mike, drove her to the tram stop, promising to pick her up that evening at 6:15 p.m. After hugging her father goodbye, Rachel met her boyfriend and her friends at the next stop, and they all headed to the academy together. Excitedly, Rachel told her friends that she would earn a significant amount of money that evening. Although they pressed her for details, she insisted it was a secret and that she couldn't share more. Given Rachel's appearance, her friends speculated that she was involved in modeling work. During their lunch break, Rachel and her boyfriend Manny visited a nearby shopping center, where she paused in front of a shoe store to admire a pair of shoes she had wanted for months but couldn't afford. She entered the store and asked the salesperson to hold a pair of shoes for her so she could return the next day to buy them. Manny pressed her again to share details about a mysterious job and whom she would be working with, but Rachel only mentioned that she would be meeting an old acquaintance that evening who had found her a well-paying job. Manny found it odd that she had so many secrets, but despite his persistent questioning, Rachel remained tight-lipped. She reassured her boyfriend not to worry, claiming it was nothing significant and posed no danger. When class ended, the group gathered as usual to head to the tram stop and go home, but Rachel said she would take a different route this time to meet someone. She hugged Manny, promised to call him that night when she got home, and then left. Concern arose when Mike arrived at the tram stop at 6:15 p.m. and noticed that his daughter was missing. This was unusual for him, as Rachel was typically very responsible. Trying to remain calm, he assumed she might be late for the tram and chose to wait for her. However, as time went by without any sign of Rachel, his worry grew. Elizabeth, Rachel's mother, also began to feel anxious when neither her husband nor her daughter returned home for dinner. At 7:40 p.m., Michael called Elizabeth to inform her that Rachel was missing. They were extremely worried because Rachel had a fear of the dark, stemming from previous incidents where two men had followed her home. The parents decided to contact the police for help. The police dismissed the concerns of Rachel's parents, telling them that not enough time had passed to file a missing person report, suggested that their daughter might just be protesting and had run away temporarily. The police advised them not to worry and to go home and wait. However, her parents knew their daughter well and were certain that she would never behave in such a way. Their family communication was open and casual, and Rachel felt comfortable discussing anything with her parents. Rachel's parents sensed something was wrong and decided to search for Rachel themselves. They first reached out to her boyfriend and her friends from the academy. Manny informed Rachel's parents about a mysterious job-related meeting she had that night, which they were completely unaware of. They also learned that Rachel had not taken the tram with her friend. Alarmed by this new information, the parents went to the police station, but were ignored again. The next day, Rachel still had not been heard from, so her parents and friends began to search the entire city. They spoke to people, distributed flyers with her photo, and pursued every possible lead, no matter how small. Unfortunately, their efforts seemed fruitless, but they did not give up. Rachel's loved ones organized search groups, and many volunteers joined in. News of the missing young dancer spread quickly, and it wasn't until the third day, as the case gained public attention, that the police finally decided to assist. The first suspicion that arose with the police was regarding Rachel's boyfriend, but he had a very convincing alibi, so he was excluded from the list of suspects. Finally, a crucial lead emerged. A former student from Rachel's academy reported seeing her with another young woman at the tram stop on the night she went missing. The witness shared that she traveled on the tram with them and overheard their conversation, which sounded perfectly normal for two young girls. She also noted the specific station where they got off, mentioning that Rachel stood out because she looked well put together, while the other girl appeared more casual. The police were able to confirm this information by checking surveillance footage from the tram stop. The investigators' next step was to examine the Barber family's phone records, particularly from the days leading up to Rachel's disappearance. They discovered something. On the night before she went missing, Rachel received 2 calls from a former neighbor, who was also the family's nanny, Caroline Reed Robertson. They had lost touch with her 5 years ago. This revelation brought a sense of calm to the Barber family. They began to believe the police's theory that Rachel had run away with Caroline for reasons unknown to them. At least this makes them believe that Rachel is still safe. The investigators revealed that Caroline worked as a mobile phone operator in Melbourne. When the police investigated her workplace and found that the day after Rachel's disappearance, Caroline went to work, but everyone could see that she was very upset and pale, so they sent her home. On the following day, she called in sick but still came to work to collect money owed to her by a colleague. Caroline explained that she needed the money to pay for a truck. Investigators also learned that she had applied for a bank loan during that time, but was denied. Following these findings, the detectives decided it was important to speak with Caroline's father, David Reed. David shared that when he learned about his daughter's epilepsy, he went to visit her. Initially, Caroline refused to let him inside the apartment. When Caroline finally allowed him in, the bedroom door remained closed the entire time. On March 12, 1999, the police obtained a search warrant for the apartment. When they entered, they found Caroline unconscious on the floor of her room, apparently having suffered an epileptic seizure. They called an ambulance and rushed her to the hospital. Besides, they discovered clothing that was not Caroline's size, and they were struck by the numerous photographs of Rachel plastered on the walls. They also found writings, notes, and several intimate diaries. While the contents of these diaries seemed harmless at first, they later uncovered something disturbing within the entries. That evening, when Caroline woke up, the investigator immediately asked her about Rachel's whereabouts. Her response was unexpected and shocking. She coldly stated that Rachel was dead. The investigator couldn't accept what he had just heard and asked her again if she was sure. He wondered if there was still a chance to save Rachel. Caroline confirmed it was too late, stating that she had killed Rachel and buried her on the family farm next to her pets. Following Caroline's directions, the police went to the site and discovered Rachel's body in a decomposed state, with a computer cable around her neck. This revelation left everyone in disbelief, especially the Barber family, who were devastated to learn they had lost their young daughter, particularly at the hands of her former nanny. Caroline lived near the Barber house and came from a wealthy but troubled family. Throughout her life, Caroline battled depression stemming from feelings of inferiority and her parents' indifference. She has epilepsy, obesity, and acne, which worsened her already low self-esteem. At school, she faced bullying, which made her increasingly withdrawn and fueled her self-hatred. In her teenage years, she began writing in a diary, chronicling her internal struggles and disappointments. She expressed thoughts like, "I don't belong anywhere in this crazy world because I am ugly, fat, and have a horrible face. I am a rarity." At 14, she drew a self-portrait highlighting her negative self-image, surrounded by words like loser, unwanted, dirty, fat, useless. In other words, she grew up despising herself, and her situation worsened significantly with her parents' divorce. Afterward, Caroline desperately sought her father's approval and support, writing him heartfelt letters about her struggles. Unfortunately, he did not respond with understanding or sympathy, nor did he visit her. Meanwhile, her mother, Gail, concerned about Caroline's issues and noticed her unusual behavior. Gail grew closer to Rachel's mother and confided in her. When she learned about Caroline's challenges, Elizabeth suggested that Caroline see a specialist for help. However, Caroline's mother felt powerless to assist her daughter. It was in this context that Caroline joined the Barber family. From the start, she realized that their family was very different from hers. There was a sense of love and happiness. Meeting Rachel, then 10 years old, she felt that this girl had everything Caroline wanted but couldn't have. In Caroline's eyes, Rachel was perfect. This admiration sparked a dark obsession and jealousy within Caroline toward Rachel. Caroline aimed to gain the Barber's trust, which she accomplished by being hired multiple times to care for Rachel and her younger sisters. During this period, she began writing in her diary about Rachel, portraying her as a model for self-improvement. Caroline's troubled mindset led her to see Rachel as entirely positive, fueling her desire to emulate her and attain what Rachel had. However, her efforts to achieve this were unsuccessful for a while, especially after Caroline's family moved away. Despite this, she continued to pursue her obsession with Rachel, documenting everything in her diary. It was possibly at this point that she started to develop a dark plan. Her fantasy evolved into a calculated scheme. Wishing to be like Rachel was no longer sufficient. She felt she needed to become Rachel. To achieve this, one of the two girls had to disappear. In early 1999, Caroline reached out to Rachel with an offer for a reputable modeling job. However, Elizabeth intervened, stating that her daughter was too young to work as a model. Undeterred, Caroline tried again, hoping for a better outcome. On the eve of her plans, she called Rachel to persuade her to meet. Caroline meticulously detailed her intentions in her diary, outlining every step to ensure success. For example, she wrote about poisoning a pizza with sleeping pills and instructed Rachel to claim she couldn't discuss their meeting due to confidentiality regarding a psychological study. Other disturbing entries described plans to drug Rachel with illegal substances, hide her body, alter her appearance, and dispose of her. One entry included reminders to check the farm on Tuesday, arrange a bank loan for a move, disguise her hair, clean the house thoroughly, and wash the carpet. These notes led investigators to conclude that Caroline acted with premeditation, having planned everything in advance. Just as planned, Caroline misled Rachel by promising her good payment to take part in a psychological evaluation, but insisted that Rachel keep it a secret. Trusting Caroline, Rachel did as she said. In her testimony, Caroline mentioned that she couldn't recall all the details of the incident but remembered meeting Rachel at the train station and then taking a tram to her apartment. Once inside, Caroline drugged Rachel with sleeping pills. The next thing she remembered was strangling Rachel with a computer cable. Afterward, she concealed Rachel's body in her closet for 2 days while she dealt with moving arrangements. A man who helped her move verified this. He remembered transporting furniture and an object wrapped in bags, and Caroline had advised him to be careful with it because she claimed it was a statue. According to her records, it was revealed that Caroline planned to escape to a new location and start fresh with a different identity. Caroline also detailed the new persona she wanted to create, which included having the same birth date as Rachel. At one point, she asked Rachel's sister for Rachel's birth date to help her obtain a birth certificate and falsify the birth date on it. Caroline portrayed her new identity as a young, rebellious girl with facial features similar to Rachel's. She attempted to secure a bank loan to start a new life but was denied. Caroline Robertson was charged with Rachel Barber's death on March 13, 1999, and remained in custody until her trial in November 2000. She was sentenced to 20 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after serving a minimum of 14 years. The judge described Caroline's actions as malicious, stating that she took Rachel's life to pursue an excessive dream, motivated by jealousy of Rachel's beauty and individuality, believing that this would lead to her own success and happiness. However, the judge also noted that Caroline had a personality disorder that influenced her behavior and indicated that she posed a real danger to anyone who became the focus of her intense attention. 3 years after the incident, Elizabeth published a book called The Perfect Victim, which recounts her daughter's story. In 2009, a film about the case was released. While in prison, Caroline began a romantic relationship with another inmate. She became eligible for parole in 2013, but the Barbers, Rachel's parents, protested her early release, leading to a postponement of the decision in subsequent years. Ultimately, Caroline was granted parole in 2015. The Barbers are uncertain about her rehabilitation, but hope that authorities will monitor her behavior once she is free. Caroline's appearance had changed significantly since her incarceration, and her lawyer noted that she had transformed her behavior during her time in prison. He mentioned that she felt happier than ever while incarcerated. An innocent young girl lost her life due to circumstances over which she had no control. A troubled, unstable person mistakenly believed that taking the lives of others would grant her the qualities she envied, and that beauty was the path to happiness. Caroline clearly needed psychological help, which was evident through her behavior within her family. Unfortunately, the help she needed did not arrive in time, resulting in a tragic outcome. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Alan Helmick. Alan Helmick, born in 1946 and raised in Colorado, developed a passion for sports, especially baseball, from an early age. After completing his education, he married his teacher, Sharon. Together, they raised a family, welcoming 3 daughters and a son, Alan became a successful businessman, starting a real estate company and then expanding into retail and the automotive industry, which helped his family thrive. Sharon was a devoted homemaker, taking care of the family. Their seemingly perfect marriage lasted for 30 happy years until tragedy struck in January 2003, when Sharon suddenly died of a heart attack. This loss was the deepest shock of Alan's life. He struggled with grief and depression for a long time. Even 2 years later, in 2005, the pain of her death still affected him. To cope, Alan focused on supporting his children and began taking ballroom dance classes, pursuing the dream that Sharon had wanted to share with him just before her death. During the classes in Grand Junction, Alan met Miriam Giles, a 48-year-old dance teacher who had recently moved to Colorado. Miriam had also suffered a great loss. Her daughter had died of an overdose in 2000, which was ruled an accident. Unable to bear the pain, Miriam's husband took his own life while she slept next to him. Hearing her story deeply affected Alan, as he could empathize with her pain, and their relationship blossomed into a romance. After a few weeks of getting to know each other, Miriam moved into Alan's home. They lived together for a few years before getting married in 2006 and started looking for a new place to live. Miriam, a horse enthusiast, convinced Alan to buy a large plot of land with a stable. They eventually found a location that was ideal for Alan, as it allowed him to run his business from an office closer than before. He showed his love for Miriam by showering her with gifts. From the outside, Alan and his wife appeared to be a happily married couple. However, Alan's daughter was concerned about the pace at which their relationship was progressing. Despite this worry, both Alan and Miriam seemed genuinely happy. On the day of the dance competition, Miriam felt unwell. While Alan was busy processing documents and signing papers, she frequently went to the bathroom. Eventually, she walked out to the parking lot where Alan was waiting in his car. Miriam wanted to get some things from the trunk. After opening the trunk and searching for a while, she felt unwell again and hurriedly went back inside. Meanwhile, Alan continued to wait in the car. Suddenly, he noticed smoke coming from the back of the car. At first, he thought it was just exhaust smoke and turned off the engine. However, the smoke became thicker and blacker. Realizing something was wrong, Alan got out of the car and saw a fire in the trunk. He quickly ran inside to get a fire extinguisher. On the way, he met Miriam, who was using a container to get water from the bathroom to put out the fire. The fire department was called and quickly arrived to extinguish the flames. When Alan checked the trunk, he found a burnt rope soaked in gasoline. This raised suspicions, indicating that the fire was intentionally set and not due to a car malfunction. The fire department interviewed witnesses and assessed the scene, concluding that only Miriam could have caused the fire. However, Alan firmly believes that this is impossible, but he could not ignore the possibility that an intruder had quietly approached the car. He refused to believe that his beloved wife would try to harm him, let alone kill him. He dismissed the incident as an accident, although he expressed some doubts. The event was quickly forgotten, and although there was still uncertainty after the fire, the couple's life returned to normal. Unfortunately, during this time, Alan fell ill. He spent most of May in bed, but by June, he was starting to feel a little better. Although he was diagnosed with hypertension, he began to adopt a more active lifestyle. Alan loved life and looked forward to the opportunity to return to the field when he regained his health. After a long illness, he seemed to be recovering. However, he did not answer missed calls. This continued until June 2008, when Alan's daughter attempted to contact her stepmother, Miriam. She was also unable to reach him, so she left a voicemail mentioning her plans to visit her father. Unfortunately, her efforts went ignored. On the evening of June 6, she continued to try to contact her father, noting that she had not been able to reach him for over a week. She called her stepmother back, but there was no answer. In the voicemail, she asked her stepmother to inform her father that she wanted to see him and was concerned about his well-being. Despite living nearby, all of her attempts to contact him went unanswered, making it unclear why she did not go to the farm to check on him in person. At approximately 8 a.m. on June 10, 2008, Miriam left the house to go to the local Walmart. After shopping, she contacted her horse trainer. At approximately 9 a.m., Miriam called her husband, Alan, and left a voicemail saying that she loved him and planned to pick up groceries before meeting him at a nearby Chinese restaurant at 10 a.m. Alan did not respond to her message. Miriam tried to call him back but could not reach him and asked him to call her. By 11 a.m., Miriam was at the Chinese restaurant waiting for Alan. After about 15 minutes, she called him a third time, feeling increasingly anxious and upset that he did not answer. She decided to go home with her groceries. As she entered the laundry room from the garage by her usual route, she was surprised to see an overturned trash can. When she looked around the corner, she saw Alan's legs sticking out. Miriam saw her husband lying motionless on the floor, which frightened her. She dropped her belongings, began to cry, and immediately called the police. She told them that she had returned home from shopping and found her husband dead in the living room. Although she was initially certain that Alan was dead, she followed the operator's instructions to perform CPR. However, she felt it was in vain because he was unresponsive. A patrol car arrived at the Miriam family home. The police found Alan lying on the floor. The officer noted that Alan was cold to the touch and had no pulse. There was blood nearby, and the officer observed several open cabinet drawers and a trash can that had been knocked over. A .25 caliber shell casing was also found. When his wife Miriam was taken away from the scene for questioning and photographs, the police found it odd that she was completely clean, despite her claim that she had attempted CPR on her husband as requested. When questioned, Miriam admitted that she had washed her hands after administering first aid. However, the kitchen sink was found to be completely clean and dry, leading the police to believe that she had lied. They suspected that she had not actually tried to help her husband and had only pretended to do so during the phone call. In addition, her calm and even cold demeanor only added to the police's suspicions. Miriam, who has now been taken to the police station for further questioning, recounted the events of that tragic day from the beginning. She confirmed that she had woken up early, made coffee, and talked to her husband on the terrace. They discussed their plans for the day. After the conversation, she took a shower and made the final adjustments to her shopping list before going out to buy household items. It was a normal day, and she had called her horse trainer and, following his advice, bought carrots for the animals. When she first tried to call her husband, he did not answer, which was unusual for him. After the third call, she became alarmed and slightly angry. When she returned home, she found her husband lying on the floor. Confused as to what had happened, she immediately called the police. Miriam mentioned that Alan's son, Alan Jr., was at their house and had left for work around 6 a.m. The conversation then turned to Alan Jr., who had been living in their house for several weeks. He would come home after his shift. Alan Jr. had a separate room and used a different entrance to his room. He occupied part of the first floor and tended to live in isolation. At the time of the incident, Miriam had not seen Alan Jr. for about 4 days. She suspected that he was not getting along with Alan, but she did not provide any strong evidence to support this belief. Just before the incident, his son, Alan Jr., had come to visit him from Alaska. They had some paperwork to take care of. Miriam mentioned that they were experiencing problems. However, at the last minute, things took an unexpected turn. Alan had banned his son from coming and warned Miriam to call the police if Alan Jr. showed up at their house. Miriam said that Alan Jr. was in a dispute over the ownership of the stove and that his father had spoken out against him. This situation contributed to the deterioration of the relationship between father and son, and they did not see each other. She acknowledged the possibility that Alan Jr. might have threatened her father, but she was unsure of the specifics. It seemed that Miriam was trying to blame Alan Jr. The police discovered a particularly strange detail in Miriam's story. She could not even remember the addresses or ages of her husband's children, which was very unusual. Alan Jr.'s alibi was later verified, clearing him of suspicion. Other family members claimed there had been no conflict between Alan and his son, making it clear that Miriam's story was a lie. The police began to follow her movements around the city on the day of the incident. They found it strange that she made some unusual trips, especially when she went across town just to buy a bag of carrots, which was clearly not enough for their horses. They pointed out that the vegetables could easily have been purchased at Walmart. This behavior led the police to suspect that she might be trying to create an alibi to explain her long absence from home. Miriam became the prime suspect. In response to the detectives' questions, she said that they had a prenuptial agreement stating that all property acquired before the marriage would go to his children. She hinted that Alan might have been the victim of a robbery. Miriam observed that some shelves had been pulled out and found her husband's wallet left in the kitchen. Normally, the wallet contained several $100s in cash and several credit cards, but it was now missing. Their house was filled with valuables, but they never locked their doors. Miriam claimed that they never used locks or keys. Miriam stated that her husband had no enemies and that their neighbors were decent people. However, she also claimed that she was not involved in her husband's romantic affairs, so she could not provide details about any potential rivals Alan might have encountered. During questioning, Miriam revealed that Alan owned a gun collection. She also mentioned that Alan had struggled with health issues. She noted that he had quit smoking about a year before the incident due to high blood pressure, and that his health had declined since then. Furthermore, he had been taking antidepressants to cope with emotional difficulties stemming from the death of his first wife. Miriam insisted that Alan had no enemies. However, she mentioned a minor dispute that occurred a few weeks before the incident with a contractor who was working on their property. Alan had asked for a handwritten invoice and then delayed payment for several weeks, but the debt was eventually settled. The police inquired whether there was any insurance policy on her husband. Miriam was unsure, but mentioned that Alan owed investors about $400,000 for various projects. This raised suspicions, as she had previously stated that she was unaware of her husband's financial problems. Unexpectedly, Miriam asked the police if they suspected her of being guilty, to which they responded that they had some doubts about her story. In response, she produced a large stack of receipts from various locations in the city where she had made purchases on the day of the murder, as if to demonstrate that she had meticulously collected evidence to support her alibi. After questioning, Miriam's clothing from the night of the murder was collected and tested for gunpowder residue. She was then released. During the autopsy, the medical examiner discovered a gunshot wound to the back of Alan's head. No gunpowder residue was found on his skin. Alan died instantly from the wound, falling to the ground with bruising on his head, arms, and body. There were no defensive wounds, suggesting that he had been attacked by surprise. Toxicology revealed the presence of caffeine and nicotine, but no alcohol, illegal drugs, or prescription medications were detected. It was clear that this was a homicide. An expert determined that Alan had died several hours before the police arrived at the house, around 8 to 9 a.m. His wife left the house around that time, suggesting that she may have been involved in the crime, but there were no traces of blood or gunpowder on her clothes or hands. However, traces of gunpowder were found at the scene, suggesting that Miriam may have changed clothes and cleaned up. The police accessed Alan's cell phone. Earlier that morning, his daughter had called him to discuss some documents and a meeting to sign them. There were also calls from unknown numbers, possibly creditors who had contacted him after hearing about the tragedy. In addition, the phone had received many calls from friends and family. To gather more information, the police interviewed the housekeeper, who had known the Allen family for many years. The housekeeper had cleaned the house and had met Allen before his first wife died. She recalled that she had last been to their home on June 9, 2008, just one day before the murder. She confirmed that the door was usually unlocked, allowing her to enter and begin cleaning as usual. However, she noticed that Allen was acting unusually. He was normally very talkative, but that day he ignored her presence and did not even greet her. He seemed very nervous and did not make eye contact when he sat down at the table. Shortly after, a strange man arrived, leading her to believe that there was a problem in the couple's relationship. Unfortunately, she was unable to provide any further useful information. The police decided to look into Miriam's background and discovered some interesting information. After the tragic deaths of her daughter and husband, she faced legal troubles that forced her to sell her assets to settle lawsuits. When the police spoke to a family member, they learned that there were indeed financial problems, largely due to Miriam's extravagant spending habits. Allen was a successful businessman who provided generously for his children, but the purchase of a horse stable and a dance studio, along with the high cost of maintaining the horses, had left them financially devastated. The situation became even more suspicious when, on the same day his car caught fire, Miriam discovered that he had sold his business to pay off debts and had just received the money before they set off. Interestingly, Miriam had excused herself to go to the bathroom just before the fire broke out. It seemed that she had lost interest in her husband because of their financial troubles and decided to take his money and stay away from him. In addition, none of Allen's relatives were able to contact him in his final days. Allen's daughters felt that Miriam was trying to prevent them from reaching out to their father. The more the police spoke to Allen's relatives, the more inconsistencies and falsehoods they discovered in Miriam's testimony. At the time, the police believed that Miriam had a financial motive. However, Miriam claimed that she did not benefit from her husband's death due to their prenuptial agreement. According to the agreement, all of Allen's assets would be divided among the children, but the house they bought during their marriage was considered community property. This meant that Miriam could claim half of it if her husband died, which was a significant amount of money. Many witnesses believed that Allen's wife was the only person capable of killing him. Some suspected that his sudden decline in health shortly before his death was related to an attempted poisoning. These suspicions were partly supported by the fact that his symptoms were consistent with those of poisoning. However, an autopsy found no toxins in his system. It is possible that the toxins had been processed by his body during his long illness. Additionally, another daughter of Allen, who had been living with her father and stepmother for some time, observed Miriam using Allen's mobile phone without permission. Allen's daughter believed that Miriam had disconnected the phone, preventing Allen from contacting his family. This behavior became apparent during the time when Allen's relatives were unable to reach him. The police investigated the deaths of Miriam's daughter and her ex-husband, Jack Giles, and found them to be highly suspicious. The daughter died of a drug overdose, but it is unclear how she obtained the fatal dose. She had a close relationship with her father, but was estranged from her mother, which contributed to Jack's depression. He died 2 years later under unusual circumstances. He had been shot in the right side of the head, although he was left-handed. During this time, Miriam was the sole beneficiary of life insurance policies for both her daughter and Jack, leading the family to suspect a connection between their deaths. Miriam quickly received and spent the insurance money, but 6 months later, a court ordered her to give half of Jack's insurance money to his child from a previous relationship. After Jack's death, Miriam left Florida for Colorado, where she married Allen Hemlick. A disturbing development arose when it was revealed that she had a history of fraud. including attempts to cash counterfeit checks and being implicated in several burglaries. When police investigated her background, they discovered a long history of legal troubles in various states, where she had used multiple false identities to engage in illegal activities. Although she claimed that she would inherit nothing but the house if Allen died, police discovered a $250,000 life insurance policy in his name. Furthermore, shortly before Allen was murdered, Miriam attempted to increase the coverage to $2 million. However, when she tried to claim the money after Allen's death, she was informed that she could not do so because he had been late with his payments earlier in the year. The payment issue arose because Miriam had restricted Allen's use of his cell phone, causing him to miss payment reminders. 2 weeks after the murder, Miriam's best friend reported some disturbing experiences. Miriam called, sounding frightened, and explained that someone had broken into her home while she was at work. A friend offered her a place to stay. The next day, they decided to go to Allen's house together. There, they discovered a yellow envelope with a postcard hidden under the carpet. The postcard, written in a scrawl with many errors, ominously stated that Allen was the next victim, not the last, in Miriam's life. Feeling threatened, Miriam quickly contacted her lawyer. Although she feared for her life, she expressed concern that the letter writer might return to her home. She also mentioned seeing strange cars parked nearby and hearing unusual noises the night before the murder. Police examined the note and found it was written on a rare type of postcard, which led them to the place of purchase. Within days, they had surveillance footage confirming that Miriam had bought the postcard and sent it to herself. The store clerk even remembered her. The investigation revealed that Miriam had harmed her own parents. First, she robbed her father and even burned down his house. Then she went to her mother's house, who lived in another state, and robbed her before fleeing to Mississippi. Miriam had also stolen from Allen several times, leading to suspicious transactions on his account. A bank employee noticed these irregularities and tried to inform Allen, but he was unaware of the situation because his wife had hidden her phone. It was discovered that more than $140 had been withdrawn from Allen's account, although he had not made any significant purchases. This was unusual, as all of his associates stated that Allen often planned large purchases in advance and discussed them with his accountant. The day before his death, Allen appeared very upset, perhaps because he had learned about the unauthorized withdrawals, which could have caused him considerable stress. Could this situation have led to a murder? When the police decided to arrest Miriam for the murder, they discovered that she had left Colorado and was staying at her son's house in Florida. Miriam had taken her belongings from Allen's house with her. She quickly registered on a dating website, stating that she was looking for a wealthy man who earned at least $500,000 a year to meet her needs. During the investigation, police found several searches on Allen's computer related to horse euthanasia. There were numerous searches for medical drugs used for this purpose, including dosages of sleeping pills and poisons, along with information about their dangers. This was concerning because Allen had nothing to do with horses. It was his wife who cared for them. It appeared that she was the one searching for this information, raising suspicions that Allen may have been the victim of poisoning. Police suspicions were confirmed when it was learned that Miriam's family had no sick horses that needed euthanasia. On November 8, Miriam Giles was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. The prosecution had a substantial amount of evidence for the case, but relied heavily on circumstantial evidence. It is believed that Miriam had been trying to kill her husband for a long time. She was also suspected of attempting to blow up Allen's car while he was inside it. This incident may have prompted the police to begin their investigation. At the time, the film No Country for Old Men was popular, featuring a villain who blows up a car. The prosecution theorized that Miriam had been inspired by the film and attempted to kill Allen in a similar manner. A DVD of the film was actually found in their home. On December 12, 2008, bail was set at $2 million, and Miriam remained in jail. It was discovered that she had used several forged documents, including a passport and a driver's license. The prosecutor insisted that her entire life had been based on deception. Many of her statements during interviews were presented to the jury, along with numerous instances of her lying and her extensive criminal record that contributed to Alan's death. However, the prosecution relied heavily on circumstantial evidence to support the murder charge. The defense argued that there was no concrete evidence that Miriam used a gun to shoot her husband, and that the murder weapon was never found. After witnessing the defense's desperate attempts to prove Miriam's innocence, the jury ultimately found her guilty. Miriam Giles was convicted of first-degree murder and arson of her father's house, in addition to multiple counts of document forgery. After a brief deliberation, the court sentenced Miriam to 108 years in prison. The prosecutor's office then attempted to charge her with the murder of her first husband, Jack, as she was the prime suspect. However, the evidence gathered during the investigation was deemed insufficient, and no charges were filed. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Mary Griffiths. In 2009, Mary Griffiths was a 38-year-old woman and the mother of 3 daughters, aged 9, 10, and 13. All 3 children were born during her marriage. However, her relationship with her husband did not last long. By 2007, they had divorced, but they remained on good terms. Mary was granted primary custody of the children while her ex-husband took them on weekends. There were no disputes regarding this arrangement. Mary focused on moving forward and providing for her daughters. She worked hard to ensure they had everything they needed. To save time on commuting and spend more time with her children, she found a job as a fitness instructor at a gym near her rented home. Over time, Mary was able to purchase a house in the small town of Berry Street, Edmonds, UK. Her life seemed to be improving more and more. Mary decided to try building a relationship again. With her good looks, attractiveness, and great physical shape, she felt confident that finding a partner wouldn't be a problem. Thanks to her outgoing personality and striking appearance, she quickly caught the attention of John McFarlane. They met during a time when both were searching for new jobs. As they got to know each other, they discovered a shared passion for martial arts, sports, and similar perspectives on life. Over time, Mary and John began taking the same fitness classes. They both became instructors at the same fitness center. Despite some clear differences between them, they connected easily. They began spending more time together, commuting to work, having lunch, and hanging out after their shifts. John even covered for Mary at work when she couldn't make it. However, for Mary, the relationship was just a friendship. Mary is outgoing, so she easily connects with people, including John. She considers him a friend and firmly believes their relationship is purely platonic. When speaking with her family and friends, she often emphasizes that there is absolutely no possibility of a romantic relationship between her and John, partly because he is married. Unfortunately, John saw things differently. He interpreted Mary's friendliness and conversations with him as a sign that they could become a couple. Deeply infatuated with her, he began to romanticize their interactions. Mary's behavior only reinforced his feelings. For years after they became friends, Mary helped organize John's 40th birthday party. John misinterpreted this gesture as something deeply personal, an indication that she had romantic feelings for him, which only reinforced his certainty about his feelings for her. John was naturally introverted and had little experience with women who offered him the kind of warmth and care that Mary did. His marriage had grown cold over time, so Mary's attitude felt especially significant to him. After the birthday party, he started dreaming of a life with her by his side. These fantasies quickly turned into an obsession, despite him still being married. He began discussing with his friends the possibility of divorcing his wife to pursue Mary. Mary, however, was unaware of his feelings. A few months later, she started dating someone else, which shocked and disappointed him. Mary was happy in her new relationship and openly shared details with him, not realizing the emotional pain it caused. For him, the situation became deeply traumatic. Resentment and anger built up over time, eventually becoming impossible for him to contain. Mary shared a post about her boyfriend on social media, and that was when the problem started. John responded to the post by leaving angry messages. He insulted Mary and made baseless accusations, including infidelity and a reckless lifestyle, none of which were true. John's behavior grew increasingly obsessive, and he started attempting to intimidate Mary through frequent and unsettling phone calls. Mary started to notice that John would appear at places she visited, even though he had no reason to know her whereabouts. Their interactions dwindled, and the distance between them grew, but John was clearly unhappy about this. The tension escalated further as he bombarded her with daily phone calls. His erratic behavior began to strain her relationship with her new boyfriend. Mary's friends and family observed that John acted as though they had been in a romantic relationship and believed she had betrayed him. He seemed consumed by these imagined scenarios, leading to ongoing dissatisfaction and aggression. Although John's actions were not illegal, Mary had made it clear on multiple occasions that she only considered him a friend and never intended for their relationship to be more than platonic. Unfortunately, John's perception of the situation did not align with reality. Mary grew increasingly anxious due to John's troubling behavior. Fearing his aggression, she avoided public places in the city, worried she might encounter him. Her fears escalated when an intruder entered her home late at night and slashed all 4 tires on her car. She suspected that John was responsible. She was convinced he wanted to sabotage her relationship with her new boyfriend, leaving her isolated. His interference was successful when he spread false information about her, ultimately causing her and her boyfriend to break up. Mary was devastated by the breakup, while John felt triumphant. Misinterpreting her distress, he believed she was now available and ready to be with him. He saw her resistance as playful teasing, deluding himself with fantasies about their connection. Feeling haunted, John took a drastic step. After learning that Mary had broken up with her boyfriend, he immediately went to court to file for divorce from his wife. Although they had been married for over 20 years, John was determined to leave and start a new life with another woman. This became particularly troubling when Mary found out. She couldn't understand where he was getting his ideas or what was influencing his decisions. The entire situation deeply unsettled her. Seeking advice, she often spoke with her relatives, who encouraged her to contact the police. Mary had enough evidence to take action against him, but her doing so only escalated the situation. John began bombarding Mary with calls and messages. In each message, he expressed his intense emotions, insisting they could be incredibly happy together if she agreed. He claimed Mary had feelings for him that she was suppressing, urging her to be honest and embrace them so they could pursue a life together. However, Mary had no such intentions. In one conversation, she firmly stated that they were just friends and that she had no plans to take their relationship beyond that. This upset John, as his perspective on friendship was different from Mary's. Yet, he couldn't resist trying to become more involved in her life. Although she rejected all his romantic advances, she still maintained their friendship. It seemed she pitied him, and perhaps even feared that ending their connection would lead to serious problems. Mary hoped to continue the relationship peacefully. He, however, took every opportunity to be near her, visiting her home frequently, and she always let him in. During these visits, he repeatedly made advances, such as attempting to kiss her when they sat together on the couch. Mary consistently rejected him, but he persisted. Mary considered ending the meetings, but John then used his cleverness to get closer to her daughters. He bonded with them, spending quality time together, and they began asking when he would visit again. After John's divorce, he spent almost all his free time with Mary and her children, as though he were waiting for them to invite him to live with them. Meanwhile, Mary's relationship with her ex-boyfriend remained unresolved. Both she and her ex had doubts and considered rekindling their relationship. However, those doubts were primarily rooted in John's behavior, making them uncertain about the possibility of being together again. Whenever John sees Mary and her ex-boyfriend together, he gets angry and often has aggressive outbursts. On one occasion, he lost control entirely. Still, she tried to remain patient, while John blamed her for the breakup of his relationship. Eventually, she asked her ex-boyfriend to visit her home more frequently to help her and her children feel safer during those moments. When John found out, he reacted badly. He began posting misleading content on social media, claiming he was in a relationship with Mary. Tired of the situation, she decided to put an end to it. She left a comment under the post, clearly stating that there was no relationship between them. In this situation, the most reasonable thing for John to do is leave Mary alone and focus on his life, allowing her to mend her relationship with her ex-boyfriend. However, John went to Mary's house again instead. By exploiting her sympathy, he convinced her to let him in. Mary, having a kind heart and considering him a friend, allowed him to stay the night, offering him the couch. It was a stormy evening, and she didn't have it in her to leave him out in the bad weather. He appealed to her compassion, reminding her of his struggles after being kicked out by his wife. The arrangement was that he would sleep on the couch, and the next morning, after the children left for school, they would discuss and clarify the situation. For John, it was all just a game. That same night, he attempted to seduce Mary. Mary, however, believed that he stood in her doorway at night, watching her as she slept. At the time, she was in bed with her youngest daughter, who was afraid to sleep alone in her room. She woke up feeling unnerved by his unsettling gaze. She began yelling at him to go away, which woke the children. The incident led to another heated outburst, during which John accused his friend of giving false hope only to crush it for his own amusement. Afterwards, John left, but things took an even darker turn. He started posting alarming content on his social media accounts, talking about death and hinting at ending his life. He also shared these thoughts with many of his friends. At one point, he even shared a disturbing photo of himself standing next to a noose in a barn, as if he were preparing to follow through on his threats. His actions escalated further when he attempted to swallow sleeping pills on 2 separate occasions in a short time span, both of which required medical intervention. On May 3, 2009, John's behavior had become so troubling that Mary insisted he see a psychiatrist. His friends, including his ex-wife, agreed with her. However, the psychiatrist could not diagnose John with any mental disorders and concluded that he was not a danger to himself or others. This misjudgment would prove to be the first in a series of tragic mistakes with devastating consequences. It seemed that John was aware of the issues he was facing and became distressed when the doctors decided not to treat him or admit him to a psychiatric clinic. This news deeply frightened Mary. She felt threatened, worried for the girls around her, and helpless in the face of this danger. On May 5, 2009, Mary's worst fears began to come true. That day, she called emergency services at 999. She told the operator that her friend, John, was acting erratically and appeared to have gone crazy. His alarming behavior left her anxious and unsure of how to handle the situation. Mary explained his history of stalking, his inappropriate actions, and his references to ending his life. Despite these concerns, the operator assessed the situation as non-urgent, indicating a response time of 1 to 4 hours, as all officers were occupied. Mary was informed that a police officer would only be able to visit her the following morning. The operator advised her to call again if the situation escalated, promising a faster response in that case. However, Mary had valid reasons for her initial call. On that day, John attacked her for the first time, exploiting his knowledge of her vulnerabilities. Injured in the attack, she sought treatment for her leg at the hospital. But upon returning home, she found John waiting for her. He was relentless, always lingering near her, pretending to support her, and trying to convince her that she could not live without him. The situation became so dire that when Mary was putting her daughters to bed, the girls were deeply afraid that John might return and harm their mother, possibly taking her away forever. John, finally driven away, was furious. He sent Mary a threatening message, feeling rejected and vowing revenge. Those who knew him were deeply concerned about his behavior and even alerted the police. For instance, Mary's friend called emergency services at around 6:30 p.m. that same day, expressing worry about John's mental state due to his volatile actions. Despite clear evidence of John's dangerous behavior, the authorities failed to take Mary's friend's warning seriously or consider the urgency of her earlier call. Much later, close to midnight, John himself made another call to the police to report a robbery. This ensured that the officers would respond to his call, giving him the opportunity to go to Mary's house. Before leaving, he sent a message to his wife, expressing that he still loved her but blaming her for their problems and the breakup with Mary. He ended the message with an ominous and ambiguous note, suggesting he planned to resolve matters once and for all. John armed himself with an axe and a specialized weapon used for slaughtering cattle, then headed toward Mary's house. At the time, Mary was resting with her children, completely unaware of the impending danger. Around midnight, John arrived at her house, standing near the back door. He used the axe to break in, then threw it in the kitchen. He proceeded to locate the fuse box, which he knew from previous visits, and cut off the electricity to the entire house. With the power out, he climbed the stairs to the second floor. Mary was asleep in her room with her 10-year-old daughter but woke up when she heard someone entering. Confused, she tried to turn on the light and realized it wasn't working. In a moment of terror, she recognized who the intruder must be. Before she could act, John attacked her. He began hitting her and dragged her out of the bed onto the floor, where he pinned her down and started choking her. The commotion woke up all the children in the house. They tried to resist John, but he was much stronger than they were. He injured 2 children and attacked Mary, aiming for her chest. She managed to dodge, but the bullet hit her shoulder, leaving her wounded. This escalated into a desperate fight for survival. Despite her injury, she fought back with all her strength. Realizing she couldn't overpower him, she decided to reach the street, hoping to draw him away from the children and call for help. Mary's 2 daughters were injured and unable to resist any longer, and Mary tried her best to protect them. John attempted to strangle her but failed. Injured and desperate, she struggled to make her way to the front door. She managed to run down the stairs and out onto the street, screaming for help. Her cries caught the attention of the neighbors, who began coming outside to see what was going on. Several witnesses saw John holding a weapon, which he pointed at Mary's chest as she stood terrified. In front of everyone, including children, he attacked twice. Among the neighbors was an off-duty policeman who had been at home resting. The officer approached John, trying to calm him down and reason with him. Without hesitation, he aimed the weapon at the officer, threatening to attack. Unarmed, the policeman raised his hands and retreated, a move that likely saved his life. Afterward, John struck Mary's youngest daughter and fled the scene. Among the neighbors were doctors who attempted to assist Mary while waiting for an ambulance, but tragically, their efforts were in vain. She passed away. 2 of her daughters required hospital treatment, though their injuries were not severe, at least physically. Thankfully, the situation did not escalate to the worst-case scenario. Later, it was revealed that John's original plan was not to harm Mary but to target her children. However, his plan didn't go as intended. He had also planned to take his own life in Mary's home to ensure she lived with the resulting trauma. He shared this sinister plan with a friend through a messaging app, explaining that this was his idea of revenge for Mary breaking his heart. Sadly, the friend dismissed these remarks and did not intervene, merely advising John to return to his wife and calm down. After attacking Mary, John immediately wrote to the same friend and confessed what he had done. He was later found bleeding near the house where he had been living for the past few weeks. Upon returning to the house, he attempted to end his life by cutting his wrist but was rescued in time. After regaining consciousness, he claimed to experience memory lapses. He stated that he recalled multiple attempts to end his life, including one just before his arrest. John told the police about his relationship with Mary, describing how she had rejected and betrayed him. Vaguely, he remembered fragments of their fight and the attack, but most of his memories were missing. While it appeared that he may have been in a state of emotional distress, the detectives believed he was feigning mental health issues to avoid responsibility for his actions. Their suspicions were reinforced by evidence that John had carefully planned the crime. He had shared the plan with a friend, said goodbye to his ex-wife, and even contacted the authorities beforehand to delay their arrival. John took weapons from the farm where he worked and spent additional time at the fitness center prior to committing the crime. This further demonstrates that his actions were intentional, in contrast to those of individuals suffering from severe mental illnesses. Predictably, the defense attorney argued that John suffered from a mental disorder and had endured a difficult childhood. Following this argument, John was sent for a psychiatric evaluation, which confirmed that he had a severe form of depressive disorder. Despite receiving this diagnosis, he did not admit guilt, claiming that he could not remember anything. Initially, the prosecution aimed to prove premeditated murder in court, but this course of action was eventually deemed unnecessary. After assessing all relevant factors, John's lawyer advised him to accept responsibility. John changed his testimony and pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter, although he maintained that much of what had occurred was beyond his memory. For Mary's family, this confession brought some degree of relief. Nevertheless, they were compelled to endure the hearing, during which they agonizingly learned the harrowing details of Mary's final moments. John McFarland received a sentence of life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 20 years. Typically, parole for such crimes is not considered until after 30 years. However, the court reduced the minimum term to 20 years, citing confirmed mental health issues as a mitigating factor. Mary's family was outraged that the court had considered John's mental health as justification for a reduced sentence. They strongly believed that John deserved a far harsher punishment, arguing that he not only killed Mary but also posed a serious threat to others, including her children. In their view, John should remain isolated from society permanently. The family testified to John's obsessive and dangerous behavior, presenting evidence that he had initially planned to harm the children. Ultimately, it appeared that Mary's desperate struggle with John had diverted his attention away from the children, but at the cost of her own life. Due to the persistent efforts of Mary's family, the case was reviewed. As a result, John's minimum sentence of 20 years was increased to the standard 30 years. Following the retrial, the senior investigator approached Mary and expressed hope that the revised decision and extended sentence would provide her greater comfort. However, the matter did not end there. Mary's children, Sophie, the youngest, turned 18, Hannah, 19, and Jessica, 22, jointly decided to pursue accountability for those they believed had contributed to John's attack. They held the police department, specifically the dispatcher, and the psychiatrist who had deemed John sane and failed to mandate psychiatric treatment, responsible for their perceived negligence. They argued that if the danger posed by John had been fully understood, Mary might still be alive. This seemed logical, as even a brief conversation with a psychiatrist, who had evaluated John after his arrest, reportedly revealed signs of mental illness. Serious psychological issues had clearly been overlooked, and it remained unclear why 2 previous hospital tests had failed to detect similar problems. It became evident that the response to calls placed by Mary and her friend, made only half an hour apart, was inadequate. The dispatcher underestimated the severity of the situation, which they believed to be the main reason the police failed to respond in time to prevent the tragedy. This failure prompted revisions to several regulations aimed at improving threat detection and enhancing police procedures. It was decided that law enforcement officers had fulfilled everything correctly within the regulations. However, Sophie, Hannah, and Jessica do not lose hope that their efforts were not in vain and that this will at least help save the lives of other victims. Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Judy Southern. Sometimes, from the very beginning of an investigation, everything seems to work out. The Supreme Court might directly point to a criminal, but practice shows that they are not always correct. While they tried to connect one person to the crime, the real culprit was walking free. Judy lived in Manhattan, New York, USA. She was a young woman who worked part-time at the post office. She always focused more on family and children than on career success. However, she wanted to get an education. Therefore, after graduating from high school, she entered college and successfully graduated. During this period, she met Alan Southern. They began a relationship and then got married. Judy and Alan lived together for more than 6 years. They raised a child together. From the outside, it seemed that everything was fine in their family, until one day that destroyed the entire family idyll. On June 7, 2000, Judy was in a good mood as she went to work in the morning, delivering mail around the area. At about 3:30 p.m., she returned home and, as always, found no one there yet. Judy arrived first and was getting ready for her husband to return from work. She had a 5-year-old son who was visiting his grandparents at that time. The boy was supposed to return in the evening. Once inside, Judy immediately noticed a strange mess on the kitchen table and found a suspicious note. She remembered that no one was there when she left for work. No one from the household could have come and left a message. Her husband was at work and never showed up during the day. Judy didn't have time to figure it all out, began to read the note, which turned out to have quite disturbing content. While she scanned the piece of paper, a stranger came out of a dark room and headed towards her, weapon at the ready. Without warning, he attacked her twice. The first bullet missed, but the second hit Judy in the lower abdomen. She fell to the floor and screamed in pain, losing consciousness. When she came to her senses, the attacker was nowhere to be seen. Judy barely reached the phone and tried to call her husband for help. But the phone was not working. She wanted to get to her mobile phone but could not remember where she left it. Fearing that the stranger might still be nearby, Judy crawled to the front door and carefully opened it. She stood up, leaning against the wall, left the house. Judy tried to attract the attention of others to scare off the criminal. She was bleeding and managed to walk only a couple of meters before she fell down exhausted. She knew her husband would be finishing work soon and would be near the house. That is exactly what happened. A few minutes later, he drove up in his car and immediately noticed his wife lying on the ground near the house. Judy was covered in blood but still alive. Alan picked her up and placed her in the back seat of the car. Judy was weak but tried to tell him about the attack. She pointed to the courtyard, but her husband still didn't understand what she wanted. There was no time to figure it out. Alan realized his wife's condition could be critical. Driving towards the hospital, Alan dialed 911, informed them that he had found his wife wounded near their house and was heading to the hospital. He asked them to meet them on the way. Judy was still conscious, said that a man had attacked her. She mentioned the name like Barry several times, claiming he had set up an ambush. By the time Judy arrived at the hospital, she had already lost consciousness. Doctors urgently took her to the operating room, but she died right on the table before receiving help. Her twin sister, Trudy Smith, arrived at the medical center a few minutes later. Alan informed her about the attack. She hurried because she wanted to support her sister. However, she doesn't have enough time. When Trudy received the tragic news of her sister's death, she approached Alan and accused him of what had happened. Alan seemed embarrassed. Trudy vowed to bring him to justice. The police immediately spoke to Alan, who became the main suspect. Because, typically, the closest people are involved in such cases. From the very beginning, Alan referenced Judy's own words about the shooting and the ambush organized by a certain Barry. The problem was that he did not know a single person among her acquaintances by that name. Trudy also could not recall anyone by that name. Meanwhile, forensic experts examined the crime scene and managed to find a considerable amount of evidence confirming that someone had indeed set up an ambush there and spent a significant amount of time in the house waiting for the victim. Such persistence seemed to indicate hatred, anger, and a personal motive. This only confirmed to the detectives that the criminal should be sought among the victim's immediate surroundings. Nothing was stolen from the house, so the robbery theory was immediately excluded. Mysterious Barry had taken a shower, played video games, and even found an adult toy belonging to Judy. It is not known what he did with it or why he left it in a prominent place in the bedroom. It became why Judy could not call from home for help. It was impossible because the killer had cut the phone line. He clearly wanted to deprive the victim of any chance to survive, and it worked. Doctors were sure that with timely assistance, she could have been saved. Despite the fact that the shot did not kill her immediately and she was able to leave the house, there was no one to help her. Unfortunately, she had to wait for Alan to arrive for some time, during which she lost a lot of blood. The detectives discovered traces of Alan, her husband. He continued to insist that he had nothing to do with the ambush. There were cigarette butts lying everywhere in the house, suggesting that the killer had smoked more than a pack of cigarettes while waiting for Judy. During the investigation, it turned out that neither the victim herself nor her husband smoked that brand of cigarettes, although this was not strong evidence of his innocence. This became the first piece of evidence in favor of Alan's alibi. It was strange that the criminal had entered the house without breaking in. Alan believed that all the windows and doors should have been closed before he left for work, but the shooter could have escaped through the window, which was wide open. During the searches, Alan remembered that his wife sometimes left the kitchen window slightly open to air out the house. This change in testimony was perceived as a very alarming sign. Spent cartridges were found at the scene of the crime. The first bullet hit a wooden wall. Flax was collected for further examination, and the police tried their best to find the weapon, but it was all in vain. Now, locating it had become a priority. It was believed that Alan managed to dispose of the gun, and naturally, he did not confess to this. Everything seemed to be against Alan. He was the first to report the incident and had spent the last minutes of Judy's life with her. His entire car was covered in blood, as were his hands and clothes. When Alan's office was searched, even more suspicious evidence was found. A special device for recording calls was installed on the family's home phone. Thanks to it, Alan could listen to their conversations while at work, checking his suspicions. This immediately drew the attention of the authorities to Alan. This became a reason to increase pressure on him. The most curious piece of evidence was a note found at the scene, which appeared to be a suicide note, but not written by Judy or her husband. A new name also surfaced in this case, Jonathan. On the other hand, Alan and Judy had serious problems, which offered more reasons to commit a crime. The recordings of telephone conversations were linked to his attempts to catch his wife in infidelity. He planned to use all of this to gain an advantage in court during their pending divorce. As it turned out, both were unfaithful in their marriage. Alan had already had 2 mistresses, which Judy knew about. These affairs significantly contributed to the collapse of their marriage. At the time of the attack, Judy also had a lover. They contacted him, but the man's name was not Jonathan, and he did not appear to look like a killer from the beginning. All suspicions were removed when he provided a reliable alibi. Just 2 days before her death, Judy had called and complained about problems in the marriage, mentioning that they were even sleeping in different rooms, that for over a month, nothing had kept them together except for their 5-year-old son, Jacob. Judy had long wanted to file for divorce but saw how well her child was with his father and did not want to ruin that bond. Alan truly played a significant role in Jacob's life. However, this no longer mattered against the backdrop of constant quarrels. Judy could no longer tolerate the conflicts and was planning to file for divorce. It is obvious that this gave Alan more reasons for anger. He could have been jealous of her, fearing that he would lose his son or be forced to share custody or pay alimony. Trudy confirmed that they indeed had disputes about their child, and both wanted to obtain custody rights, making the divorce process expectedly difficult. Trudy, too, had reason to confront Alan with accusations right in the medical center. However, the most compelling and disturbing arguments for the investigation came from Judy's friends. Everyone knew that Judy had serious marital problems, but the situation was worse than it seemed. Judy had repeatedly stated that if something happened to her, Alan would definitely be guilty. The possibility of financial motives for the crime also emerged. As their relationship began to crumble, Alan could solve all his problems at once and gain some benefit. This turned out to be true because a life insurance policy for Judy was found during the investigation, with her husband and son as the beneficiaries. Of course, Alan denied everything. He was interrogated for hours, but he insisted that under no circumstances would he kill the mother of his child. He claimed that he loved his son too much to deprive him of the most valuable person in his son's life. According to the investigation, there was not enough evidence to bring charges. More material evidence was needed. At a minimum, it was necessary to wait for the results of all the examinations. Contrary to the detective's expectations, doubts about the correctness of the choice of the main suspect arose with the first reports. The note found in the courtyard of the Southern house, identified as a suicide note, was signed by a certain Jonathan. However, the handwriting was not very legible, and the note itself was slightly contaminated with the blood of Judy. Complicating matters, it was clear that the note was addressed to a woman named Melanie and the letter was addressed to my wife, Melanie. At first, this confusion deepened because Melanie Southern did not exist, but there were other details in the letter, including an address that matched with Melanie Binney. This young woman lived at the location indicated in the note. She had a daughter and a husband named Jonathan Binney. The Binney family home was located approximately 5 kilometers from the ambush site where Judy was found. When the police checked Jonathan Binney in their database, it turned out that he fit the profile of the killer, as he had previously encountered problems with the law. Until recently, Jonathan had committed only minor offenses, but he was now under investigation for something far more serious. Shortly before Judy's death, he had abused his 3-month-old daughter. Initially, detectives believed that this note could have been written by Alan to mislead them and remove suspicion from himself. However, this clue needed proper analysis. In the suicide letter, Jonathan indicated that he wanted to leave this life voluntarily because he could not imagine being imprisoned for abusing a child. This all appeared suspicious when the detectives arrived at his house, where they found only his wife, Melanie. She admitted that he had not lived there since her statement about the child abuse case. Melanie was very angry with Jonathan. When she found out what happened to the Southern family, she was shocked because, in her opinion, Jonathan did not look like a killer, although she was no longer sure of anything. She was amazed at how close she had let a true madman, capable of such atrocities, into her life. She told the police where Jonathan could be, and the detectives arrived at the specified address. But even there, the suspect could not be found. Investigators contacted his close friends, but they also did not know where he could be. In the media, an alert was issued that a dangerous criminal was on the run, and they believed he could not have gone far. Additionally, considering the suicide note, they expected to find his lifeless body sooner. Tracking him down, the police used K-9 units with specially trained dogs and aerial support from police helicopters. The search took nearly a day until finally the dogs led the police to the basement of a house. There, Jonathan was found lying on the floor, shirtless, with 6 nicotine patches stuck to his chest. He was alive. The man told the police that he had attempted to take his own life by overdosing on nicotine. This was probably meant to convince everyone that he felt remorseful. Jonathan did not resist when he was arrested. He even seemed a little glad that it was all finally over. At the time of the crime, Jonathan Binney was 26 years old. His behavior raised doubts about his mental stability. Some suspected he might have mental issues. However, a psychiatric examination indicated that he was aware of his actions both during and after the crime. This led investigators to suspect that he was merely trying to elicit sympathy with his threats. Melanie provided detectives with writing samples that were analyzed by a handwriting expert. The expert found several significant characteristics that distinguished Jonathan's handwriting. He noted the similarity in the spelling of the lowercase g and f in the suicide note and in the samples. According to the analysis, there was almost a 100% probability that this letter was written by Jonathan himself. After this conclusion, the case against Alan began to collapse. Prior to Jonathan's arrest, the police had offered Alan a polygraph test. He agreed and passed with flying colors, which should have strengthened their confidence in his innocence, but they did not want to let him go. Alan was kept under suspicion until Jonathan confessed to attacking Judy, making it clear that Alan had no involvement in the crime. Alan was subsequently released. Another key piece of evidence was the DNA found on the toy in the house. The expert used dozens of filters to collect particles of saliva and skin from the killer, which also matched Jonathan's profile. This linked him to the crime scene. The day before Jonathan was arrested, the police found a 9mm handgun, a significant discovery. Despite a thorough search, they did not find this 9mm handgun registered to Alan. The gun was later confiscated and examined, but ballistics tests showed that it was not the weapon used to kill Judy. However, a dog team found another gun of the appropriate caliber in the woods near the house. Ballistics experts were now able to compare the bullets, cartridges, and guns, tests were conducted. The markings on the bullets were then compared to objects from the scene of the massacre. The tests allowed investigators to prove that Judy was shot with this pistol. Fingerprints were found on the handle of the pistol, which also led to the arrest of a child abuser, Jonathan. During the search of Jonathan's house, police managed to find 9mm Cobra cartridges for a concealed carry pistol on the body under his clothing, as well as other evidence. All this confirmed that Jonathan was the weapon's owner. Melanie also told the police that he always carried a weapon with him, which he bought for self-defense. However, this had little effect on the situation with Alan. Even after that, he still looked suspicious. There were too many doubts against him because of the existing motive. Therefore, his status changed. It was now believed that he did not kill his wife with his own hands but became the mastermind behind the murder, using Jonathan as the executor. However, he refused to admit he didn't even know Jonathan. The theory that Alan hired Jonathan to kill his wife was also carefully investigated for a long time. The correspondence and calls were analyzed, but no connection leading Judy to Jonathan could be found. It seemed they were not acquainted at all. Against this backdrop, authorities tried to find at least some connection between the criminal and his victim in order to understand the motive for the attack. For a long time, it was thought this would help uncover Alan's involvement in the crime. It seemed suspicious that Judy called out a similar name before her death. Perhaps she really knew him or was trying to say something else, but her husband did not hear. The closest tie the police found was the period when Jonathan worked as a security guard at the library, where Judy occasionally borrowed books. They both had membership cards for the institution and exchanged pleasantries with each other. However, when questioned, the employees of the library could not remember any incidents involving Jonathan. The staff described Jonathan as a somewhat strange young man. While he worked as a security guard, he had no problems in his service record, at least none were known at his workplace. In fact, during this period, Jonathan had only minor offenses. When they questioned him about his job at the library, he could not recall anything that might connect him to Judy. Eventually, the detectives were forced to admit that this murder was a spontaneous act of aggression against an unknown person and a coincidence with Alan. All suspicions against Alan were dismissed. Jonathan was not familiar with Judy Southern. The choice of victim was random. He was merely driving around the city on his moped, looking for a suitable house to ambush. The Southern house seemed ideal to him, primarily because he spotted an open window that allowed for easy entry. Once inside the house, Jonathan clearly envisioned his actions. He had no specific target and was prepared to shoot whomever entered first, aiming to harm an innocent person. He smoked to ease his nerves. When it became he'd have to wait, he played video games and rummaged through the rooms. He never commented on Judy's abandoned adult toy. When Jonathan discovered that Judy had a husband and a 5-year-old son at the time, he claimed he would have shot any of them without discrimination or hesitation, even a child, if they had entered the house. Jonathan also confessed to abusing a 3-month-old child. Due to the ongoing investigation, he later told the authorities that he did not want to go to jail for child abuse, especially considering the familial ties and age of the victim. He was aware of how badly prisoners with such convictions were treated and described in detail the suffering caused by his fear of incarceration. Therefore, he sought a way to remedy the situation. Jonathan decided to go to jail as a murderer. He likely did not realize that he would be tried for both crimes and face 2 sentences, making it impossible to entirely hide his dark past. While in the ambush house, Jonathan altered his plan and decided to take his own life after committing the murder, so he didn't particularly care about leaving evidence. With these thoughts, he even wrote a suicide note. He spent several days behind bars and eventually told the police, without waiting for his lawyer, that he wanted to officially plead guilty to Judy's murder. Jonathan was not planning to deny his guilt regarding the abuse of a 3-month-old. His conscience was eating away at him, and he was ready to talk to detectives again. The entire local community was shocked by what had happened, especially Melanie, who had already suffered greatly. The media eagerly reported that a 3-month-old baby had been abused by her own father. Authorities feared public unrest and felt compelled to provide increased protection for the criminal. When Melanie learned that her husband was willing to kill any person, even a child, to avoid jail time for his shameful crime, she desperately wanted him imprisoned forever, or better yet, sentenced to death, so that this bloody chaos would end as soon as possible. Given the evidence collected, even without a confession, Jonathan Binney faced little chance of receiving a lenient sentence. He was found guilty of murdering Judy Southern and abusing a baby, receiving the highest punishment before being placed on death row. The court's decision elicited strong reactions from both the killer's wife and the family of the deceased, who finally breathed a sigh of relief and continued to raise their children. Jonathan's lawyer fought for a temporary reprieve, even managing to secure one at first, and subsequently signed a written agreement with the authorities stating that he would never again appeal the sentence if the death penalty were commuted to life imprisonment without the chance of parole. This agreement worked. Jonathan Binney is now serving a life sentence and remains behind bars. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of the Milken family. In the quiet neighborhood near Forbes Lake in Kirkland, Washington, the Milken family exemplified the American dream. Their home was filled with love, laughter, and the joy of a well-established life. The head of the family is Leonid Milken, a sergeant in the Washington National Guard. His journey began in 1989 when he and his family emigrated from Ukraine, seeking a new beginning in the United States. By 2006, Leonid was stationed in Iraq, bravely confronting the challenges of war. Despite the distance, his heart remained with his family, and he eagerly counted down the 6 weeks until he could return home. He was deeply supported and cherished by his wife, Olga. Born on July 22, 1977, Olga is a professional dental assistant in Bellevue. She skillfully balanced her career with raising their 2 young sons, was known by neighbors for her friendly and welcoming nature. Olga and Leonid have 2 sons, Justin, who is 5 years old, and Andrew, who is 3 years old. They bring joy and energy to the home. Justin was very proud of his father and often told people that he was in the military. Both boys were loved very much, and their aunt, who is Olga's younger sister, often showered them with special affection. At 24, Lyubov Botvina, Olga's younger sister, was full of ambition and kindness. She was a sophomore at Seattle Pacific University, studying for a bachelor's degree in foreign languages. She often visited the Milken family to spend time with her nephews, Andrew and Justin. The Milken family's journey from Ukraine to the United States was challenging. However, with resilience and a love for life, they managed to rebuild their lives from scratch. They settled in Mill Creek, Washington, and became vital members of the local Russian-Ukrainian community. Their home was a warm refuge filled with love, dreams, and a blend of cultures, a place where their past and future were harmoniously connected. Tragically, on July 17, 2006, their story took a horrific turn when an unimaginable incident shattered their world. After firefighters extinguished the fire and entered the ruins of the house, they discovered the bodies. However, these individuals did not die from the fire. The cause of their deaths remains a mystery. They had been stabbed multiple times, sustaining serious injuries. Someone had done this on purpose to make them suffer. The police quickly identified their main suspect, shocking the entire neighborhood. Connor Skierman, a 24-year-old man who had recently moved across the street from the Milken family just 2 weeks prior, came under suspicion. Witnesses reported seeing him trespassing on their property while carrying a red gasoline container shortly before the fire broke out. The most disturbing detail was the deep scratches on his face, suggesting he had engaged in a struggle, possibly with someone desperate to escape his actions. Connor was arrested on July 19, just 2 days after the murders. During questioning, he confessed to starting the fire but claimed to have no memory of the murders themselves. He said he passed out from drinking too much alcohol that night, specifically 3 bottles of vodka. He only remembered waking up in the Milken family's house, surrounded by dead bodies. So who was Connor Skierman? He was born in Bellevue, Washington, and before the tragic incident, he appeared to be an ordinary neighbor. However, beneath this facade lay a criminal with dark intentions. He had kept logs of the Milken family and plotted their demise. Later investigations revealed CCTV footage of him purchasing items to start a fire. Was this act motivated by hatred or a manifestation of a deeper monstrosity within him? This question would linger in the minds of many for years. Before the murders, Connor had no notable criminal history. His violent actions on July 17, 2006, stunned the community, resulting in his arrest and conviction for killing Olga, her two young sons, Justin and Andrew, and Lyubov. Connor acknowledged that he showered in Olga's home, changed into the hospital scrubs he found there, and bought gasoline to intentionally set the house on fire in order to conceal his involvement. However, he consistently denied committing the murders. Instead, he pleaded with the jury to trust him. Despite his claims, the evidence against him was overwhelming. When investigators examined the tragedy within the Milkin family, they meticulously collected the necessary evidence to charge Connor. Although the fire destroyed much at the scene, several key discoveries were still made. Among the burnt debris of the Milkin home, a blood-stained hunting knife was found at the bottom of the stairs. This knife was identified as the weapon used in the attack on Olga, Justin, Andrew, and Lyubov. In the master bedroom, where Olga and Lyubov's bodies were discovered, investigators uncovered clothing soaked in blood. This clothing provided DNA evidence that directly linked Connor to the scene of the crime. Additionally, a flashlight located in the same bedroom suggested that the attack was premeditated. A glove, partially burned in the fire, was found near the victims. This item not only placed Connor at the scene but also showed that he attempted to hide his fingerprints during the brutal attack on the family. Furthermore, security camera footage showed Connor buying gasoline from a nearby station shortly before the fire was reported. This evidence supported the timeline and his intention to destroy evidence by igniting the house. During Connor's arrest, officers noted fresh cuts and scratches on his face and neck, consistent with defensive wounds inflicted by the victims during their struggle, further connecting him to the crime. The conclusion was both horrifying and clear. This was not an accident or a drunken mistake, it was a planned massacre, a cold-blooded crime carried out with brutal intent. 3 years later, Connor Skierman's trial began. Selecting the jury took several weeks because the death penalty was a possibility. The prosecutors claimed that Connor had planned the attack, entering the home armed with the intention to kill. They argued that he had brutally murdered an entire family and then attempted to destroy the evidence by setting fire to the house. Connor's defense team focused on a different angle. They argued that he had been in an alcohol-induced blackout. They brought in addiction specialists, psychiatrists, and toxicologists to support their claim that Connor was too intoxicated to have intended to kill anyone and that he couldn't remember the murders due to his blacked-out state. However, the jury did not find this argument convincing. During the sentencing phase, Connor took the stand to give a 25-minute emotional statement. He pleaded with the jury for mercy, apologized to the Milkin family, and admitted to setting the house on fire, but he did not confess to the murders. He appeared subdued, with a face showing regret and anxiety. As he spoke, his voice trembled, and he frequently wiped away tears with a tissue, struggling to stay composed while also conveying his remorse through his slumped posture. During his speech, Connor avoided discussing the details of the crimes, following legal advice and the rules that allow defendants in death penalty cases to talk without being cross-examined. Instead, he concentrated on expressing his regret and the effect that his potential execution would have on his family. However, his words fell short. As he spoke, the Milkin family remained silent, their faces expressing a mixture of emotions, pain, anger, and perhaps a desire for closure. Olga's husband, Leonid Milkin, who was serving in Iraq when the murders occurred, listened closely, but his feelings were hard to read. The pain he endured was unimaginable, and now he had to confront the man responsible for his loss. Connor's defense attorney, James Conroy, argued that Connor was a troubled man who was struggling with alcoholism. He claimed that during the murder, Connor experienced memory loss due to the effects of alcohol. However, the jury found this explanation unconvincing, which led to the guilty verdicts. In this pivotal moment, Conroy hoped that Connor's display of remorse might influence the jury to show mercy. The prosecution, led by King County Deputy Prosecutor Scott O'Toole, presented a contrasting narrative. They portrayed Connor as a calculated murderer who broke into the Milken family's home and committed horrific acts. The evidence clearly indicated the premeditated nature of his crime. O'Toole emphasized the profound grief of the Milken family, particularly the innocence of the young boys, Justin and Andrew, whose lives were tragically taken by Connor. As Connor finished his statement, he stared intently at the jury, his eyes expressing desperation. He stated that people had told him that he was going to die and go to hell, adding that he was already there, his voice choked with emotion. After these final remarks, he returned to his seat, leaving the jury to process the heavy burden of his words and the seriousness of their imminent decision. The courtroom fell silent as the jurors contemplated what they had just heard. The decision ahead of them was significant, balancing justice, societal expectations, and the remnants of mercy that Connor's plea aimed to evoke. Many lives are at stake, not just Connor's, but those of others who will forever be affected by his actions. In the days that followed, the jury would deliberate, each member grappling with their conscience, the law, and the emotional testimonies shared during the trial. Connor's statement added a personal element to their responsibilities, humanizing a man found guilty of horrific crimes. Their verdict would determine not just Connor's future, but would also resonate through the lives of the victims' families, the Ukrainian community, and the larger conversation about justice and redemption. Everyone was focused on the jury, anticipating a verdict that would serve justice for the victims. The prosecution pointed to several factors to underscore the gravity of the charges: the multiple victims, with 4 people killed at the same time, their vulnerability, given the young ages of Justin and Andrew, which highlighted the victims' helplessness, and the attempt to conceal the crime, with arson being seen as part of a plan to destroy evidence and cover up the murder. Connor was found guilty of intentionally setting fire to the Milken residence after the murders, indicating that the murders were premeditated. The prosecution claimed that the fire was a deliberate action to eliminate evidence and obstruct the investigation. On April 12, 2010, after 9 hours of deliberation, the jury reached a unanimous verdict: guilty on all charges, which included 4 counts of aggravated first-degree murder and 1 count of first-degree arson. Connor was found guilty of 4 separate counts, each representing a victim: Olga Milken, Justin Milken, Andrew Milken, and Lyubov Botvina. The penalty phase of the trial lasted 2 weeks and was filled with strong emotions. After a day and a half of deliberation, the jury unanimously recommended the death penalty. On May 5, 2010, Judge Gregory Canova of the Kane County Superior Court officially sentenced Connor to death by lethal injection. As the sentence was announced, Connor allegedly shook his head in disbelief, while Leonid felt a sense of relief that justice had been served. Connor's defense team promptly announced plans to appeal the conviction to the Washington State Supreme Court, citing issues with jury selection and comments made by the prosecution during the trial. Connor's family, who were present at the sentencing, chose not to speak to the media. King County Prosecutor Dan Satterberg addressed reporters at a press conference, stating that the death penalty is the law in the state and is reserved for the worst crimes. Satterberg, who was not in office when the death penalty was sought against Connor, praised the prosecution team for successfully presenting the case to the jury, which he believed made the right decision. He expressed sympathy for the victims, mentioning that they were wonderful people whose American dream had been tragically shattered. In 2018, the Washington State Supreme Court ruled the death penalty unconstitutional, citing its inconsistent application and potential racial biases. This landmark decision resulted in all death sentences in the state being commuted to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Consequently, Connor's death sentence was changed to life imprisonment without parole. Despite facing significant challenges, the Kirkland community came together to support Leonid Milken. During this difficult time, he found his neighbors ready to help him fight for his rights and rebuild his home. Local veterans and volunteers led the rebuilding efforts, while companies generously donated materials and labor. Together, they transformed the site of tragedy into a hopeful home, symbolizing resilience in the face of injustice caused by a man who disrupted their lives. Leonid, a sergeant, had come to the United States to provide a better life for his family, but after the tragedy, he was left to rebuild his life on his own. By 2010, for years after the murders, he was preparing to move back into his reconstructed home. He viewed it as both a memorial to his lost family and a fresh start for his future. He now lives there, carrying with him the memories of his 2 sons and beloved wife, still questioning why his peaceful life was taken from him. The Milken family massacre remains one of the most horrific crimes in Washington's history, a tragedy that shattered a family and deeply impacted the community. What do you think? Did justice truly prevail, or did Connor evade the punishment he deserved? Let's discuss. If you're interested in more cases like this, be sure to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for our next exploration of true crime's darkest stories. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Thomas Kwan. On January 22, 2024, Patrick O'Hara, 70, presented to the emergency department at the Royal Victoria Infirmary in Newcastle upon Tyne with severe pain in his upper arm, particularly at the site of the vaccine injection he had received a few hours earlier. Initially, the medical staff suspected that his pain was a result of a poor injection. They provided him with antibiotics and painkillers, advised him to monitor his arm closely. However, Patrick's situation worsened. Within hours, his arm developed blisters and changed color. The following day, he returned to the hospital, where doctors were confused by the rapid decline in his condition. Blood tests were performed but did not reveal any significant issues. Eventually, it became evident that Patrick was experiencing a necrotizing infection that was damaging his tissue, particularly around the injection site. It was likely that he had not received a vaccine but rather a toxin that led to these serious complications. To contain the infection and save Patrick's life, he required surgery to remove the infected tissue. Meanwhile, specialists were working to identify the substance that had caused his condition, as knowing the specific poison involved could help doctors formulate a more effective treatment plan. Dr. Emmett, an expert in the field, suggested that iodomethane could be responsible for Patrick's condition. Iodomethane is highly toxic, and exposure can cause burns and blisters similar to those Patrick was experiencing. There had been no prior instances of methane injections in humans, making its use particularly risky, and the substance is almost impossible to detect in the body. At around 10 a.m. on the morning of January 22, while Patrick was feeling ill, a male nurse named Raj Patel from the National Health Service arrived at his home. Nurse Raj Patel was assigned to examine Patrick and arrived at his and his partner Jenny's residence. He spoke with an Asian accent and in broken English, appearing slightly awkward but competent. The visit lasted about 4 minutes, during which he collected blood and urine samples from Patrick. Jenny, Patrick's partner, came downstairs during the check and asked to have her blood pressure taken, to which Raj agreed. After that, Patrick started preparing to administer a booster vaccine. Even though he mentioned that he had already received this vaccine less than 3 months earlier, Raj insisted that he needed another dose. When Raj administered the injection, Patrick experienced sharp and intense pain. Raj assured him that this was a normal reaction and that the pain would soon subside. However, after giving the injection, Raj quickly gathered his equipment and left the house, which Patrick found suspicious. At the hospital, where Patrick was placed in intensive care, the doctors noticed several letters that he and Jenny had received recently. They informed Jenny that there was no local nursing staff and that the National Health Service had no nurse named Raj Patel. This letter turned out to be a forgery, and the health worker was a fraud. The forgery was well crafted. It featured the National Health Service logo at the top, included hyperlinks, and used medical language along with personal privacy notes typical of unofficial reports. Another letter, sent earlier that month, followed a similar format. It included a QR code that directed Patrick to a short health questionnaire and suggested a home visit on January 22 between 9 a.m. and 1 p.m. The day before this, Patrick received a reminder text message from an unknown number, claiming to be from a health worker named Patel. However, Patrick only became suspicious when Nurse Raj began to act nervously during the injection. One particular action raised alarms. As Raj was leaving, Jenny came down the stairs and told him he was as tall as her son. This startled Patrick, and she chased after him, but he disappeared. Northumbria police then began tracking him from his home in Newcastle city centre. CCTV footage showed him driving to a hotel and checking in. Raj arrived in a car with fake number plates. He checked into the hotel using a false name. 2 hours later, he left his room wearing a long coat, a flat cap, blue surgical gloves, and a medical mask. He walked through the hotel lobby and exited the building. It was less than a 10-minute walk from the hotel to Patrick and Jetty's home on St. Thomas's Street. In the UK, number plates are specific to the make and model of the vehicle they are assigned to. The number plates on Raj's vehicle were easily identifiable as counterfeit. They matched the car's make but not its model. Investigators traced the car back to the hotel that morning and then to its original location, which led them to the small town of Ingleby Barwick, south of Newcastle in Stockton. The car had left the home of Thomas Kwan, son of Jenny Leung. Jenny has several sons from her first marriage, but she noticed a resemblance between her eldest son, Thomas Kwan, 50, and Raj Patel. Thomas was born in Hong Kong and moved to the UK 39 years ago at the age of 13. His parents sent him to an English boarding school, and he later studied medicine at Newcastle University. He is now a general practitioner and a partner at Happy House Clinic in Sunderland, about a half-hour's drive from his mother's home. Thomas had a troubled relationship with his mother, likely stemming from their parents' divorce that occurred 27 years ago. Many of Thomas's issues with her revolved around money. He believed that before their separation, his mother, Jenny, had taken £1 million from their joint account and pressured his father into the divorce. Years later, when his father passed away, Thomas was upset to find that he received a smaller portion of the inheritance compared to his younger brother. In a letter to his mother, Thomas expressed his feelings, accusing her of being unfair and of stealing money from his father. He asked her to clarify the changes in the will and accused her of betrayal. Patrick, trying to ease the tension, asked Thomas to leave the house and confronted him emotionally. Jenny's actions further complicated the family dynamics. The police were called to the scene, but Thomas left before they arrived. This incident deeply affected the relationship between him and his mother, Jenny. Since then, Thomas has had little contact with her and has not visited. When authorities began investigating the case of the fake nurse, they discovered that Thomas's name appeared in their review of the nurse's route. CCTV footage showed the car traveling from Newcastle to Ingleby Barwick, heading directly to Thomas's house. This connection raised suspicions among investigators, who found it odd that a vehicle linked to the crime was seen near Thomas's residence. They quickly sought more information about him. It was revealed that there had been a conflict over a will, which could have provided a motive for his involvement. Investigators also discovered that Thomas had previously purchased chemicals, including toxic substances, which could have been used to create the agent that made Patrick sick. These online purchases became a significant focus of the investigation. The police then searched Thomas's home and found packages of chemical reagents and equipment in his garage that resembled a laboratory. They also discovered medical supplies, including syringes, gloves, and protective masks. On Thomas's computer, investigators found searches relating to toxic substances and how to use them. Additionally, there were fake National Health Service forms that matched those sent to Patrick and Jenny. Further investigation revealed that Thomas had planned the crime well in advance, using his medical expertise and available resources. He fabricated an elaborate story to pose as a fake nurse, knowing exactly how to speak, present himself, and what documents to provide. However, his rushed escape after administering the injection, along with other blunders, ultimately worked against him. The police arrested Thomas on February 15, 2024. At the time of his arrest, he denied any involvement in Patrick's poisoning, but the evidence against him grew increasingly compelling. The case was classified as attempted murder, and preparations were made for it to go to court. Thomas leveraged his medical reputation and knowledge to create a false appearance of professionalism. He orchestrated the entire scheme to avoid detection until it was too late. During a search of his home, police discovered not only chemicals and instructions but also complete production equipment, including measuring instruments, protective suits, and laboratory containers. The investigation revealed that Thomas had been planning his crime for an extended period, gathering resources and researching their characteristics. His mobile phone contained clear evidence of his intentions, showing multiple internet searches for poisons. He specifically looked for information on how to use ricin to carry out a slow and painful murder. His searches included terms like ricin dosage, duration of the toxin, and cyanide effects on the human body, indicating that he aimed to proceed carefully and minimize errors. Despite his planning, Thomas made several mistakes that led to the investigation uncovering his scheme. For example, he used a fake license plate on his car, but the police quickly noticed that the plates didn't match the car model. Additionally, his disguise as a nurse was inadequate. Jenny's comment that he resembled her son raised initial suspicions. His quick departure from home after administering the injection and his suspicious behavior further contributed to the doubts about him. Books on toxicology and instructions for creating poisons found in Thomas's possession strengthened the case against him. Additionally, a copy of the National Center of Excellence for Police Investigation Manual on Murder was discovered on his computer. This manual could provide a criminal with insights on how to avoid detection. The evidence suggested that Thomas planned to commit the murder with great precision while minimizing the risk of being caught. What was particularly alarming was how he manipulated his family. The letters, text messages, and Thomas's fabricated identity as a nurse indicated that he was orchestrating a large-scale scheme. It was shocking to think that a doctor, someone who was supposed to save lives, was involved in such a heinous crime. When arrested, Thomas denied all accusations. However, the evidence gathered, including chemicals, laboratory equipment, books, and digital records, painted an undeniable picture of his guilt. The investigation revealed that he acted with cold calculation, leveraging his expertise and resources to commit a deliberate poisoning with the intent to kill. He refused to admit guilt regarding attempted murder, but the evidence, including his internet searches, was compelling. The police also found that Thomas had been spying on his mother and her partner, Patrick. He had installed spyware on a laptop they gave him, which allowed him to monitor their daily activities, read emails, and track financial transactions in real time, taking screenshots and saving correspondence to support his suspicions of misuse of the family's money. What was especially shocking was that Thomas devised multiple plans for the murder before finally deciding to impersonate a nurse. One of his ideas involved sending poisoned drinks or food while pretending to be part of a made-up group called the Northern Wine Tasting Club, offering free samples. These plans revealed just how far he was willing to go to achieve his goal. When Thomas created the nurse persona, Raj Patel, he made a fake ID with his own picture, used a wig, and glued on a beard. He not only had a detailed cover story but also props to support his disguise in case anyone questioned him. During the 40 minutes he spent in the house, he managed to deceive even his own mother by acting like a caring healthcare worker. This revelation stunned those who knew Thomas. Patients were shocked to find out that their doctor was involved in such a crime. Many expressed that the trust typically inspired by a man in a doctor's uniform was ruthlessly exploited. Residents in the neighborhood watched in horror as the investigation disrupted their quiet suburb. While Patrick was in intensive care, doctors worked hard to save his life. He underwent several surgeries to remove dead tissue and stop the infection from spreading further. Additionally, he needed plastic surgery to repair the damage to his arm. Fortunately, Patrick survived, but he faces a long road to full recovery. Thomas Kwan was arrested but refused to cooperate with the medical team trying to determine what substance was injected into Patrick. By staying silent, he raised suspicions that he deliberately aimed to cause serious harm. The investigation indicated that he probably used iodine. During the proceedings, Thomas asserted that he did not intend to kill anyone, he merely sought to inflict mild pain or discomfort. However, when his trial commenced in Newcastle in October 2024, this assertion quickly fell apart in light of the evidence presented. Prosecutor Peter Makepeace, in his opening statement, reminded the jury that sometimes reality can be stranger than fiction. He pointed out that Thomas's careful and detailed planning suggested that his intentions were far more serious than he claimed. Thomas's knowledge of poisons, his extensive research, and his experience made it clear that he fully understood the life-threatening nature of his actions. Moreover, Thomas's motivation went beyond mere financial gain. Even though the inheritance he received after dividing property with his relatives was relatively small, his feelings of grievance ran deeper. He accused his mother of not loving him enough during his childhood and framed the attack on Patrick, her partner, as a means to emotionally hurt her in revenge. On the second day of the trial, October 7, 2024, Thomas pleaded guilty, which spared the court from weeks of hearings. The victim, Patrick O'Hara, shared how the attack affected his life. Thomas received a severe sentence that reflected both the seriousness of his crime and the level of planning involved. The judge noted that while some aspects of Thomas's plan were poorly executed, such as using fake license plates that didn't match the car model, he had put a significant amount of effort into preparing for the crime. This level of planning justified a lengthy sentence. Thomas Kwan was sentenced to 31 years and 5 months in prison. His guilty plea and clean record prior to the incident were taken into consideration during sentencing. Patrick O'Hara faced challenges in his recovery, suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, which ultimately led to the end of his long-term relationship with Jenny. Despite these difficulties, Patrick expressed his appreciation for the professionals at the National Health Service who saved his life. After the trial, he gradually returned to a normal routine, though he continued to experience physical and emotional reminders of the attack. Nonetheless, this incident became a catalyst for new beginnings for him. After parting ways with Jenny, he relocated from Newcastle to a quiet coastal town where he found peace. While there, Patrick focused on helping victims of violence and fraud. He began speaking at conferences and in the media to share his story and emphasize the importance of remaining vigilant, even in everyday situations. Meanwhile, Jenny, overwhelmed by her son's actions and her guilt toward Patrick, worked on improving her family relationships. She stepped back from public life to concentrate on her family, but her bond with Thomas was never repaired. In prison, Thomas Kwan began to understand the seriousness of his actions. In isolation, he had to confront his motives and the harm he had caused to his family. However, prison records indicated that he still had a long way to go before he felt true remorse. At the beginning of his sentence, he continued to rationalize his actions, feeling a sense of injustice. Patrick, who had endured many hardships, found happiness in simple pleasures, like walks by the sea and friendships with those who valued him for who he was. He often expressed that his greatest achievement was learning to trust again. Although the scars on his hand never disappeared, he came to see them not as reminders of pain, but as symbols of the strength he discovered to keep moving forward, even in the toughest times.